All right, good afternoon, and it'll be evening by the time we're done. 14 games on this deeper dive to get to. Was 15, but we had a rain out, so we'll keep an eye across the country depending on anything that may impact another game or two. But we welcome you in an extended version because, as we mentioned, this is a deep dive into a pretty large slate tonight. So we're going to take as much time as humanly possible with each game, some a little more than others. And we welcome you in as always. And tonight's show brought to you by No House Advantage, Jordan in the house producing. You can follow both myself and Adam Scherer on Twitter. But first and foremost, Adam is here for you on the Super Chat, on the premium Slack, across the board, just to make sure that you have every single possible angle heading into tonight. And I must admit, my friend, at Ship My Money DFS, at Shander Show for me, before we even talk about it, if you bring it up in the event that you spoke about it, I know we have a little bit longer amount of time here, so maybe you were going to sneak it in at some point. I am a bad host / co-host to you. I did not watch episode 1 yet of iSniper. So I don't know if you've caught up to where you are, but I still, trust me, it's right there. As soon as I get through with work, it's the first thing I'm going to watch.
Yeah, I have one episode left, so I'll finish it tonight most likely, but it's good. I definitely recommend it after having seen more of it.
Okay, and how many total?
8.
8. And you could burn through it, right? They're 30 or 60 minutes.
Yeah, I think they're 45 or 60. So
perfect.
I've had a couple days where I watched like 3 or 4. Or I guess a couple days where I watched like 3, but yeah, they're pretty easy to get through.
45 is like the ideal time, right?
Yeah, it's probably like 45 without commercials. So like if you're, I think when I've watched it on Hulu, there weren't commercials. When I watched it on like on demand, there were, but you could just fast forward, obviously. So yeah, it's probably like 45 minutes of actual show.
I'm telling you, man, 45 is ideal. It's like the George Foreman, right? When you cut the fat out, you get the most of what you need, and you still decent taste of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like 60, it's just always, you end up like being drained by the end, and 30, you feel like it was way too short. So
we've got 75 minutes today, my friend, to break down everything. And I did the math. So 75 divided by 14 gave me 5.3 minutes per game. So we'll try and get, now again, some games deserve more attention than others. We welcome you in here as we'll begin going right through, starting in Pittsburgh. Leave us a like if you've already joined us. Remind others as they come in. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You want to hit the notification bell as well right there. Take advantage of what we have tonight, the NBA Showdown single game projections. That's free for you, but across the board, Awesemo plus $29.95 a week, so you have access to everything. We do have something really cool coming up in the NBA. We'll get to everything that we have on channel coming up in a minute, but we don't have a ton. I thought, all right, maybe we'd have a little bit more time. And again, some we're going to breeze through, some we're going to take a little more time with it. But let's dive right into it, Adam. Let's start in Pittsburgh. Atlanta comes in as a pretty heavy favorite here. That total sitting around 9. So at least some expectations here that there are going to be some runs, depending on if it's equal or if it's just the majority of it done by Atlanta. So let's just start, of course, as we always, with the pitching matchup, and knowing that this is a big slate. Really, Ian Anderson versus Cool, what you have, and two opposite ends as far as cost is concerned. So I'm not sure if you're looking at either here as a P2 option.
Yeah, I mean, not interested at all in Chad Kuhl. Just not a high strikeout guy. Tough matchup against Atlanta. And he's not even at a price point where, like he's cheap, but it's not like he's like 5K or something and you'll be able to do something really, really different with your lineup. So not really looking at him, but I do have some interest in Ian Anderson. Not a ton, because I think that this slate's kind of weird when it comes to pitching. Of course, you have DeGrom at the top, who just is like otherworldly, but there's a lot of decent mid-range options, and a lot of them are like $1,000 less expensive than Anderson. So that kind of holds me back a little bit, but it is a good ballpark for pitching. It is a pretty respectable 3.9 implied run total for the Pirates. Anderson himself is a pretty good pitcher, about a 24.5, 25% strikeout percentage this year against hitters from both sides of the plate. When he has had issues, it's typically been with left-handed power, or at least his expected ISO suggests that he's been getting pretty lucky against lefties, and you might see him have some issues going forward. But this is a team that doesn't really have a ton of it. Brian Reynolds is the most dangerous left-handed hitter on this team. We know that Gregory Polanco went on the injured list later. We don't have a lineup yet, but he obviously won't be in the lineup. So for lefties, you're talking, Adam Frazier, Brian Reynolds, Ben Gamel, who, despite what he did yesterday, is not a power hitter. So not a really bad lineup for Anderson to face either. So I am interested in him, just kind of not sure how much I'll actually get to because of his price tag.
I'm curious, and it's kind of going to give us a preview to how you are going to look at a bunch of games tonight across this slate. Are you looking at a theme that maybe you're going to pay up for pitching or pay up for offense in the expense of the other side?
So I haven't made my tournament lineups yet, and I think it is right now we have Jacob deGrom projected for 64% ownership on DraftKings, and that what you do with him, I think, just completely changes your strategy on what you're going to do at pitcher, because normally I end up going to deGrom, and if that's the case, I would imagine that I get a lot of 11.5K deGrom, and then I in tournaments typically end up going to that like 7,000 to 8,000. Something just fell off my counter and scared the shit out of me. In that like $7,000 to $8,000 range.
Do you know what that was?
Yeah, I think it was a hat or a shirt or something.
It wasn't like a dog or a cat.
No.
Right?
Like that was my first thought, was there was some like animal jumping off my counter, but no, it was like a hat.
Oh my God, that was great.
But yeah, anyway, so if I go to deGrom, I anticipate that I'll be going like, deGrom plus a 7 to 8K guy in most of those lineups that I can fit some bats in. If I end up not going to deGrom, and if you're someone that thinks that deGrom's too popular and you're going to go elsewhere, then I think you could make the case to just go with like 2 of those 7 to 8K guys and really play a lot of good hitters. The problem there is there's just quality value bats as well. But you do have some other guys at the top, not quite as high as deGrom, but Carlos Rodon, Aaron Nola, guys like that around 10K that you could go to, where you're still saving $1,500 or so off of deGrom. But I think in tournaments, mostly on this slate, I'll end up with one expensive pitcher and one cheaper guy. In cash, I'll probably just end up with paying up for 2 guys.
So looking at that from the standpoint of paying down or maybe not rolling with deGrom in a lineup or 2, especially from a tournament standpoint, clearly, is Atlanta, we do have them projected pretty high, but we know that, of course, they're going to be costly. Is Atlanta a stack at least that you can get to if you're not paying up for pitching?
Yeah, I don't really love them here because Cool has done a pretty good job of limiting damage this year, even though he doesn't strike out a lot of guys. He does walk guys, but only a 122 expected ISO to righties, 134 to lefties. So if you're going to Atlanta, you're kind of hoping that Cool just isn't his normal self, because if he is, he typically does a decent job of limiting that power, but he also doesn't have a very big margin of error because he doesn't have swing and miss stuff. So if he's not quite right, you can definitely take advantage of him. And there are quality bats in the Atlanta lineup. So I think right now they're kind of coming in as like a mid-range stack for me. We have them as the 5th highest top stack percentage, getting a little bit higher top stack percentage and ownership share. So I think that they're fine. They're probably not going to be my number 1 stack or anything like that. But Acuna, Freeman, Albies, Riley, obviously lots of upside there.
Pittsburgh is on the complete opposite end of it. I know that there's value in them because they're cheap, but is there any low end play in a tournament here just to take advantage of the fact that nobody's owning them?
I think it's pretty tough because you're not getting a lot of ownership going to Annie Anderson either. I'd have typically, if I go to teams like Pittsburgh that just aren't very good, it's to take advantage of high ownership or try and leverage against high ownership on the opposing pitcher. Right now, we only have about 7% ownership projected for Annie Anderson. So you're not getting a ton of leverage there. You're kind of just putting yourself in a position where you need the Pirates to like be the top scoring team on the slate, which it can happen, but good luck. I think individually though, I do like Brian Reynolds at 4,400. He's a good hitter. He has power. And like I said, I think you do see some regression against lefties for Anderson. Then Gamble at 2K, if he's batting cleanup or 5th, you're not expecting anywhere close to what he did last night, but still a $2,000 hitter on DraftKings batting 4th or 5th has some value.
Just because it's Atlanta, before we go to Baltimore, I'm curious, Adam, is there a one player that you can see yourself in a one-off scenario paying up for without going to that stack?
Yeah, it's Acuna or Freeman. I don't look at the matchup and think it's like particularly great for either of them, but right. I also think that they're very good and they're very obviously better at hitting than Chad Kuhl is at pitching.
So now moving on, we're in Baltimore here, Toronto, and he's under the 8K number that you referenced as far as working other lineups, especially if you're moving away from deGrom in a tournament. Is that what you can, is 7,800 Mats, is that workable for you, or are we still a little bit too low in order for him to fit that scenario?
There's some other guys I like a little bit more. The main reason being that Steven Matz spent about 2 weeks on the injured list and then came back last start. They said he was going to be limited, and then he only threw 48 pitches. he also didn't pitch particularly well, so it's entirely possible that he wasn't on like a 50 pitch count and they just took him out because he was pitching poorly. But it still makes me think that you're probably not getting 90 to 100 pitches or something from him tonight. And on top of that, he's okay, but he's nothing special as a pitcher. Against righties this year, about a 22% strikeout percentage. You have the Orioles running out a lineup that only has one left-handed hitter, and it happens to be one of the best hitters in the American League this year in Cedric Mullins. So even though the Orioles aren't a very good team, they do have a 4.7 implied run total here. They do have some dangerous right-handed bats batting 2 through 4 with Austin Hayes, Mancini, and Mountcastle. So I think it's kind of a scary spot for Matz. I'm not convinced at all that he's going to go deep into this game based on, just the fact, just from a pitch count standpoint. So like if I knew he was fully stretched out, I would say I would take some shots on him here against the Orioles if I'm going away, especially if I'm going away from the Grom. But the combination of thinking this isn't a really great matchup for him and also not really knowing how deep he can go into this game, there's enough other arms that I would rather roll the dice on.
Baltimore is really interesting here, and I'm assuming that. Well, I shouldn't assume anything here. At 4K, knowing the scenario, even with whatever's going to happen on the flip side, just looking at the bats for Baltimore, the secret is out. It looks like, right? I mean, they are the fifth owned stack we have so far, and you mentioned just as far as their implied run total. The books have this thing, Odd Shoppers, where we go for everything up to date, as fresh as it may be. And you can just see on the sidebar there, as Jordan has put it up, as far as totals are concerned, this thing is the highest total on the board. So it's not just, I assume, going to be Toronto doing the heavy lifting. 6.6 ownership share doesn't seem like it's too much to avoid. Baltimore, based on what you're saying and the numbers behind them right now, they don't seem like a bad stretch to take it as far as maybe even a punt as far as stacks are tonight.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty decent spot. I wish the ownership were lower. It's a lot more fun when you can roster Baltimore at like 1% owned. But, the ownership's still not crazy. Like they're getting about 7% aggregate ownership on DraftKings. If you look individually, Austin Hayes projected for about 16%, Anthony Santander at about 11%, Mancini at 9%, Mullins at 9%, Mountcastle at 6%. Like those are the guys that you would be most interested in. They're getting ownership, but it's not like it's crazy high ownership. They are projected to be a lot higher owned than their top stack percentage, but I still think you can look to them, especially as like one-offs or mini stacks. Because one thing that makes it tough on DraftKings specifically that Eric and I talked about this morning, you can't 5-man stack like 1 through 5 because Trey Mancini and Ryan Mountcastle are both only first base eligible. On FanDuel, you obviously can use them, which is nice. But so on DraftKings, that kind of hurts the value of the 5-man stack anyway. And then, I think you will just kind of see some people using them because they're cheap. But individually, Austin Hayes has a lot of power. Trey Mancini has a lot of power. Mountcastle has a lot of power. Looking at these guys, going back to the start of the 2019 season against left-handed pitching, 221 expected ISO for Hayes, 282 for Mancini, 172 for Mountcastle. But again, he's someone that's basically in his rookie year. Santander at 187. So these are guys that I have no issue with even just grabbing as like a one-off and sticking them into your lineup.
Yeah, and on the flip side here, Toronto, they are our top stack right now on the top stack tool. Again, $29.95 a week, Awesemo Plus. It's insanely affordable and easy to be part of the Awesemo Plus community. The highest owned stack, second highest owned stack. I'll talk about the Phillies coming up in a couple of minutes, but Toronto, the ownership, clearly this would be a cash lineup, I would imagine, and I don't know how often you're going to get to such a high owned stack in a tournament, Adam.
Yeah, I really like Toronto here. The ownership has come up a ton since this morning, which is disappointing. It's not unexpected, but it would have been nice if it didn't. But very clearly a very, very good spot for Toronto going up against Spencer Watkins, who recently made his major league debut. He's about 29 years old, came through the Tigers system, never even made it to the majors with a team that is terrible and has no pitching. Came to the Orioles, another team that is terrible and has no pitching, and is getting a shot. There's nothing that makes him look very good. His strikeout stuff in the minors at AAA around 20% in 2019 and this year gave up a lot of power at AAA in 16 appearances, 14 starts with Detroit in 2019. He allowed 2.58 home runs per 9 innings. This year in 7 appearances for the Orioles, 32 total innings, he allowed 1.65 home runs per 9 innings. And I don't know a lot about AAA parks, but I do know Norfolk, which is Baltimore's AAA affiliate, is a very pitcher-friendly park. So allowing home runs there is pretty not impressive. So I think, long story short, it's a really, really bad spot for Watkins. There's nothing that makes me think this guy's a good pitcher. And you have a Toronto lineup that is just full of power from top to bottom.
Real quick, before we move on to the Brewers-Mets game, is there a way to maneuver around the high-owned stack and pick off a player or two for Toronto and still satisfy your lineup?
Yeah, so I think that's one thing, and teams like Toronto do kind of lend themselves to that because there is so much power. Right now, though, we have a lot of ownership just going to the entire team, basically. Everyone, Marcus Semien, Guerrero, Springer, Hernandez, Grichuk, Bichette, and Biggio are all projected for between 11 and 20% ownership on DraftKings. So you're only getting Lourdes Gurriel and Reese McGuire as low-owned guys. Gurriel is fine. I mean, McGuire is okay because he's a catcher, but when you're talking just power bats, Gurriel, I think, has some upside. McGuire would only be in there because he's a catcher. So the point being that the guys from Toronto that you really want are getting tons of ownership right now.
All right, so Mets now, and this is, wait, pardon me. I skipped over a game. Jeez, we still have that Dodgers and Miami game first. So Lopez, Gonsolin, couple of guys kind of smack there in the middle of 7K. Are you getting to any of these guys in a P2 scenario?
I don't think I can get the Gonsolin just because of pitch count concerns. He has that good matchup against Miami. He's a very good pitcher, but there's nothing to suggest he's going deep enough into this game for him to be someone I'm really looking at in DFS. On the other side, Pablo Lopez is mildly interesting. We have him projected for 10% ownership right now, which seems about right. He has an 8% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. He's got about a 25.5% strikeout percentage this year. He's been a very good pitcher. The problem, of course, is that this Dodgers team is very good. The lineup they're running out looks good. It's not going to be an easy spot for Pablo Lopez. So I think that there is some upside at his salary, but at the same time, there are some players in this price range I like a little bit more. I do think that if you are using the strategy where you're not going to DeGrom in tournaments, or you're just going drastically underweight, and so you have a lot more pitcher exposure to allocate, Lopez probably is a guy that you should kind of just gamble on because he at least has that potential to give you 25 to 30 points based on his ability. And if you're foregoing DeGrom, you're not really. If you're fading DeGrom, you're not saying I think DeGrom has a bad game. Like, if you are, you're insane. You're just saying I think that I'm hoping that DeGrom gets 22 to 25 fantasy points, and then I can just land on some mid-range guys that outscore that. So it's not so much at that point about worrying about medium projection or most likely outcomes. It's more about saying I need to get to pitchers that at least have the ability to do that on a semi-regular basis, and Lopez does have that ability.
So looking at taking advantage of the opposite now with stacks, and it's completely opposite end of the spectrum here as far as how we have these two teams predicted. The Dodgers are comfortably, let me take a step back. The Dodgers are more in the meat of the middle, which isn't really separated by more than a point or so. And that's normal when we have such a large slate here. On the flip side, though, Miami is super low. They're super low owned. So let's start with maybe the less obvious. And again, similarly to Pittsburgh, is there any maneuverability with this punt, or is it more just a matter of getting to the Dodgers?
I don't really see it with Miami. I mean, 28 offenses on this slate. Typically, just from a macro standpoint, in large field tournaments, I think you're either looking for teams that have a very high chance of success, teams that are going under-owned, or teams that are facing a pitcher that has a lot of ownership, preferably a pitcher that isn't very good that has a lot of ownership. None of those are the case here. Miami has a 1% chance of being the top stack. They're projected for 1% ownership, so they're not going under-owned. And they're facing a pitcher in Gonsolin who isn't going to get ownership either, projected for about 1%. So Miami's not checking any of the boxes there. You're not really doing – you're not doing anything by rostering them other than saying, again, kind of like I said with Pittsburgh, I really hope Miami outscores 27 teams today, which it can happen, but there's a lot of better paths to success, I think, than just rostering terrible offenses because nobody else wants to.
Fair enough. Look, that's a point that I don't think many people would argue with, especially on this large slate. On the flip side with the Dodgers, is it just a matter of cost here, and maybe that's a deterrent getting to this stack?
Yeah, I think it is, but they are a stack that I actually do have some interest in tournaments, even though I think Pablo Lopez is a good pitcher. Lopez isn't the type of pitcher that you're going to single anyone out and say I think this guy is in a great spot because, again, Lopez is pretty good. But the Dodgers just have so much power top to bottom. They're one of these teams that if you just stack them every day at low ownership, you're going to come out ahead over the course of a season. Right now, they're only projected for about 1% ownership, 3% chance of being the top scoring stack. And so I think it is a very high upside spot. You don't necessarily need them to be like jamming them in like as your top owned team or anything, but they are a team that I think is a very good high upside spot in tournaments.
Anybody else that we should look at here? And again, you're mentioning the stack. So if it is a matter of working a one-off with the Dodgers, is there anybody specifically that you believe you're getting to more so than anyone else on the team?
Probably not. I don't think there's anyone that really stands out. Like Will Smith's probably the most valuable just because he's 3,900 on DraftKings and he's a catcher. So, for example, you could use him instead of JT Realmuto at that same price point. And Smith this year does have a 219 expected ISO against right-handed pitching, 259 actual ISO. So you're getting a very good power bat at the same price point as the extremely popular catcher.
That's all-star catcher, JT Realmuto.
Yeah.
Although I'm willing to concede the argument that he shouldn't be there. So, all right. As we keep telling you throughout every show here, we have so many tools that we use that you see pop up on the screen. So why not have access to it every single second of the day and not wait for a program or wait for a day in which it's free, like today with the NBA Showdown single game projections? Just join up Awesemo Plus. It's $29.95 a week. We have this awesome giveaway tonight for the NBA playoffs. Yes, beginning tonight, game 1 of the NBA playoffs. Just check out the pinned tweet on Awesemo_com, at Awesemo_com. Enter that, follow the instructions of the tweet, pick whether you think Donovan. Wait, no, that's old here. So I apologize. I'm reading an old promo. See, I knew I got burned earlier for copying and pasting something that was not up to date. So don't listen to anything I'm saying. Jordan's probably like, what the hell is he talking about? Here's the thing. Here's what I do know, that you can take advantage of our code MLB Deeper Dive for Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right. Make sure you do that to bump up from Awesemo Plus to Awesemo Plus Platinum. MLB Deeper Dive. Feel like Ron Burgundy. MLB Deeper Dive, 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right. You want to step it up? Do that. 25% off your first week. So I saw this here, 14 Ks, 4 14K games this year. 1 15K game this year. It's insane what this man is doing, and nobody's even remotely close to Jacob deGrom. So from a DFS stand, I even have a cool prop at 10.5. I mean, my goodness, you look at those games, you think, yeah, he can get to 11 tonight. So we'll put the prop on the back burner for a second. Just look at deGrom, and the obvious approach here is clearly in cash games, you're going to win. Make sure you take advantage of him. I guess an injury would be the only thing that would knock him out. The flip side, though, is how creative do you want to be pivoting away from him, especially, Adam, in a FanDuel lineup where you only have that one spot?
Yeah, I mean, it's really – I typically go towards deGrom. His ownership right now is at a point where I wouldn't fault you in large field tournaments if you don't. 25% on FanDuel is pretty high considering that you only get the one pitcher spot. 63% on DraftKings is just, if you're playing a tournament with 15,000 people, that's a lot of entries that have deGrom. And it's just starting to kind of minimize the upside you get from rostering him. The reason I still lean towards going there, though, is there's a couple of them. For one, I think there's enough cheap hitting on this slate that you can roster deGrom and still be pretty creative with the rest of your lineup. There's also enough cheap pitching or mid-range pitching that I think you can do that. And then also, I think that, so there's, when you talk about ownership going to stacks in baseball, I think it's really, really important because when you're stacking like 5 guys from the same team, if 20% of the field is stacking that team, you're just ending up overlapping like half of your lineup with a large percentage of the field. Whereas when you talk about a pitcher, you're only talking about using 1 of your 10 roster spots. And to me, it's a little bit less important there. Like you're like, yeah, okay, 65, 63, 64% of the field is going to have deGrom, but I can still go to a bunch of different offenses that are low owned. I can use an SP2 that's low owned. I can just do a lot of different things. Whereas when you go to more popular stacks, you're really limited in what you can do with the rest of your lineup to be creative. So that's another reason. And then third, and Eric and I talked about this morning as well, the floor that deGrom gives you is just so high. Like he's very, very unlikely at $11,500 to put up a score that in terms of points per dollar, you're just like, oh, I have to have Jacob deGrom. I can't make that up, elsewhere. But typically in baseball, you're going to win tournaments with your bats because you're just going to get ridiculous point per dollar value from your bats. So to me, it's more about just taking the 25 to 30, 25 or so fantasy points that Jacob deGrom is going to give you pretty consistently, especially on a slate like this, where I think he projects like 14 or 15 points higher than the next closest pitcher. So you're really giving up a lot if you don't go there. I have him about 11 points higher, actually. But either way, the point being, I'm still leaning towards going DeGrom. But at his current ownership, I do think that you can at least start to have that conversation where it's just like, do I really want to roster someone in tournaments that is this popular?
Yeah, and I wonder if is there a low number? I mean, I'm looking at it here. I don't know if this has changed since, but last I refreshed it, he's just at 26% projected owned on FanDuel. So that's, I would think, low compared to what the obvious expectations would be for him on a one slot roster.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's enough other good pitching on the slate that that it's still relatively high. I also think that in like single entry or higher buy-in, smaller field tournaments on FanDuel, you'll see that ownership come in a lot higher.
Okay, so looking at the opposite end of it, and I don't know, just based off of our stack tools, we know, of course, that Milwaukee is going to be at the bottom for the obvious reasons of DeGrom. It doesn't look like the Mets have much higher of a fortune here to turn into the top stack. So is this pretty much a work to DeGrom game? Maybe pick a one-off if you can and kind of move on?
Yeah, pretty much. I like the Mets, like 1 through 5 in terms of the talent in their lineup. The problem, though, is just that you're going up against a lefty in Brett Anderson. So it not that it takes them out of play, but it doesn't help guys like Jeff McNeil, Dominic Smith, Michael Conforto, all from the left side. Peter Alonso, though, individually, I do like as a one-off. We know he has a ton of power. Brett Anderson doesn't miss a lot of bats. So I do have some interest in Alonso individually. But overall, the Brewers have a sub 1% chance of being the top stack today. The Mets are at 1.8%. I just don't really find this that appealing a game outside of Jacob deGrom.
Fair enough. And now moving on into Chicago, a matchup here between Aaron Nola and Jake Arrieta. This is a game that I've seen the Philadelphia Phillies come into from, if you want to call it a storyline, a narrative, a historic standpoint, in which everything is just handed to them, gift wrapped to them, and they find a way to lose this game. So take that for what it's worth for me just watching them. I know from a numbers standpoint, there's a little bit of a different approach, but clearly Aaron Nola, just crunching lineups earlier on DraftKings, Aaron Nola comes out for anybody looking to pay up for pitching. It's Nola and DeGrom pretty much across the board. Are you approaching it that way for cash lineups for where you're trying to cash in the most chalk at pitching?
Definitely not going the Nola in cash, I don't think. If
Smart.
I were if I were going up, if I am going up there, and if the weather cooperates, I would go to Carlos Rodon before I go to Aaron Nola in cash. But I also think that you can go mid-range in cash along with DeGrom. Nola's projected ownership right now, though, is kind of interesting. We have him with the second highest top 2 pitcher percentage on the slate, but only about 15% ownership. That is something that'll change if we get bad weather reports out of the White Sox game, because he'll start to take ownership from Carlos Rodon. But the way it looks right now, this is a game where the wind's blowing out in Wrigley. It's relatively warm, not blowing out as hard as it was yesterday, not as warm as it was yesterday, but still a 4.7 implied run total for the Cubs is pretty high. And I think it's going to knock people away from Nola. So I don't necessarily think he's a great option if you are going the DeGrom route, like you're allocating a lot of salary there. But I do think he's someone, kind of like I was saying with Pablo Lopez, if you're someone that says, okay, I'm staying away from DeGrom, I'm going to roll the dice on other pitchers, you want to be going to pitchers that at least have the ability, outside of just starts where they get really lucky, actually have the ability to go give you a big game that can beat DeGrom. Nola's certainly one of those guys, coming in with a 26.7%, with a 29.4% strikeout percentage this year, 3.33 exit. Very, very good pitcher. Not great pitching conditions, kind of a scary opponent, but just from a talent standpoint, a very good pitcher.
Yeah, I feel like the price tag reflects his ceiling more so than his middle. Where
I agree with that.
He's been so volatile this month, right? Where he can get you 5 or even less than that in shelled, or he can K 12 guys in just over 5 innings. So last start against the Marlins might be his best representation of the good and the bad that he can give you in one start, where he's walking away with double-digit Ks at him, yet he doesn't even make it through 5 because he's getting peppered.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree that the price tag definitely factors in the strikeout stuff, but I think he's priced where he should be. Like if Aaron Nola were 9K, he would be the clear SP2 on the slate. So you can't really go cheaper with him. But also the reason he's not getting quite as much ownership is that there is, a pretty significant downside when you are talking about facing this Cubs team in Wrigley with the wind blowing out on an 85-degree day.
Is Jake Arrieta just human batting practice tonight, or do you have any interest in a low-end cost?
No, human batting practice I think is pretty accurate. Striking out between 18 and 19% of hitters from either side of the plate this year. He's allowed a 215 expected ISO to righties, 253 to lefties. So he's giving up power to both sides. You have a very cheap Philadelphia team. JT Realmuto back in the lineup is a bump for the Phillies. He'll be one of the most popular players on the slate today. But you also have Segura, you have Harper, you have McCutchen, you have Hoskins, you have Gregorius. Like, it's a dangerous Philadelphia lineup with the wind blowing out. They're really cheap. It's kind of similar to yesterday. We did see their ownership come down a bit yesterday. But right now, second highest top stack percentage on the slate, also the highest owned team on the slate. They look like great values. I am very confident I'll be getting to a lot of Phillies in cash games. But I, again, just think that on a 14-game slate, in large field tournaments specifically, you're probably better off not really jamming in the team that's getting almost 20% ownership, because it's still just so unlikely that they end up being the top stack. You know, they have the second highest percentage, about 10%. That's still a 9 in 10 chance that they're beat by other teams.
That total, by the way, has moved up a half a run on Odd Shopper, so now it's double digits at 10. And between Aaron Nola and this expectation that he's lights out, the Phillies bullpen being an absolute train wreck, and Jake Arrieta being human batting practice, how can you not take a long, hard look at going over 10? I mean, that thing may hit over 10 before either starter gets pulled.
Yeah, definitely has the potential to be a very high-scoring game here.
And that's the flip side here is, as you mentioned with the Phillies, it's just ownership specifically that's the deterrent. But as far as getting the one-offs, I mean, we have it just as far as one of, if not our top-ranked catcher on Awesemo and the Cruncher, as far as Realmuto coming up there. You mentioned a cheaper option earlier in the show as a pivot from Realmuto. So outside of the obvious Philadelphia stack and then the ownership that could be a deterrent to that, do you see yourself getting to, at the very least, maybe some value as far as paying up for Realmuto at the catcher position?
I'm definitely, or I don't want to say definitely because I haven't made my lineup yet. I'd be shocked if I don't have Realmuto in cash. But I think, again, in tournaments, like, he's fine. If your lineup's contrarian, going to Realmuto is fine. He's, a very good hitter. He's underpriced. The hitting conditions are great. But right now we have him projected, I think, to be the highest owned hitter on DraftKings at 38% going to JT Realmuto. There's still 27 other catchers on the slate. He's not that likely to be the top scoring catcher.
Yeah, and I wonder if Harper at 5K is just too much at this point to pay up for. I'm sorry.
I'll probably have him in cash, I would guess. I think 5K is too cheap for him in this spot. But again, like 25% ownership for an outfielder on a 14-game slate. There's just so many other options. Like, Bryce Harper can hit a home run, and if he doesn't do anything else, he's probably not going to be one of the top scoring outfielders. So, yes. It's the ownership is just a huge deterrent for me here.
And here's the thing about it. The beauty of it is whenever he hits a home run, nobody's on base. So it's not like you get anything extra from that. Who the hell cares? He hits a solo shot out in the 7th inning. Good luck. All right. Nothing with the Cubs here at this point to counter both Aaron Nola and then obviously nothing with Jake Arrieta. So is there a human being on Chicago that you have interest in tonight?
Yeah, I'm actually interested in Cubs stacks just as a whole. They're only projected for about 1% ownership in the same very, very good hitting conditions that the Phillies are in. Aaron Nola, again, very good strikeout stuff, but does give up some power. For the season, he's allowed 1.32 home runs per 9 innings. He's struggled in particular with left-handed power, allowing a 209 expected ISO to lefties. Jack Peterson leading off at 4,100. Anthony Rizzo batting cleanup at 4,800. Jason Hayward, 2,600, batting 6th. Ian Happ and Sergio Alcantara also hitting from the left side here towards the bottom of the order. So you're getting a predominantly left-handed lineup for the Cubs. The only righties in there are just very good, powerful hitters in Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, and Wilson Contreras. So I think the Cubs are a good way to get exposure to this game in tournaments without having to beat 20% of the field by going to the Phillies.
All right, let's get these likes up here. Make sure you're subscribed as well. Tell the world if they're not. You see new people coming in, part of the Awesemo community here. Remind them to not only like what you see, but also bump up the subscription. You never know what's going to happen. There could be things falling from Adam's roof. It's like a video game. He's got to duck while still doing the show as well. I did see Realmuto plus 450 to hit a home run. I'm inclined. There's a lot of a lot of dark cloud around whether or not he deserves to be an all-star, to be an opportunity tonight, take advantage of Arrieta, prove to the world that he belongs there at the Midsummer Classic, plus 450. I might throw a half a unit on there.
Yeah, it's pretty decent odds for the hitting conditions.
Yeah, I love the conditions, too, on top of it. Hitting season, as Charlie Manuel says. All right, Detroit in Texas now. And again, kind of the middle to lower end option from the pitching matchup. Are you getting to anybody specifically on the mound?
Sorry, in the Texas game?
Dane Dunning or Urania, sorry.
Yeah, I like Dane Dunning here quite a bit. He's one of the SP2s that I'm very, very interested in. He's projected for about 9% ownership on DraftKings, which I think is very reasonable. It's just a price point that I don't think quite reflects his talent level, especially against a Detroit team that has been playing well lately, but overall, isn't a particularly good team. Looks like the roof is closed in Texas as well, which is favorable for pitching. For the season, Dane Dunning comes in with a 24.3% strikeout percentage, walked 8% of hitters. He's only allowed 0.73 home runs per nine, 3.6 xFIP. He's just a pretty solid pitcher. And as far as his splits go against lefties and righties, between 24 and 25% strikeout percentage against both sides of the plate, 152 expected ISO to lefties, 149 to righties. So no real glaring weaknesses there either. I just think at 7,400, he's a very good option here. And just isn't quite as expensive as he should be against the Tigers.
So now it's about taking advantage, right? Because I don't know, I can't imagine, especially after that brutal start he had, and then also getting pushed back from the rain delay, that Urania is an option for you. So it's more so about Texas. And I'm looking at where we have on our own top stacks tool. And I wonder, Adam, if their ownership, knowing that you're going to not pay up as far as a cost standpoint is concerned, but if their ownership might be too much of a deterrent for you.
I think their ownership is reasonable. It's a bit higher than their top stack percentage, but I do think it's a very good spot against Urania. And you look individually at this team, whereas when we talked about like the Phillies or you talked about the Blue Jays, pretty much the whole team was like 10 to 20% owned. Here you have 14% going to Gallo, 14% going to Nate Lowe, about 10% to Dahl, but then it drops off and you're getting sub 10% owned guys and Holt, the rest of the lineup. So I think that from a full stack standpoint, you're going to get enough low-owned guys that it's pretty reasonable to go to. I do also just absolutely love this spot for Joey Gallo. We talked about it this morning with Eric, but Joey Gallo is someone that typically he strikes out, he walks, he hits a home run. Jose Urania has struck out 8.7% of left-handed hitters this year. So you're kind of taking the strikeout off the table. He's most likely going to just walk him. He does have a 10% walk percentage, or give up a home run to Gallo. So I really like Gallo as a one-off here. Think he's a really good play. I think Nate Lowe is a good play. I think Holt is a reasonable option leading off. And I think David Dahl batting sixth is a good value option in the outfield at 2,300. So I do like the Rangers overall. John Hicks also is a $2,800 catcher, has some power. I do like the Rangers overall, but individually just really, really like Joey Gallo. And I think Nate Lowe is a good play as well.
2,200 low cost guy for Ibanez. Any interest there?
He's fine. Like I'd rather go to David Dahl if I'm going to one of the cheap guys, just because you get the roster spot or the extra lineup bump. But I think Ibanez is fine as well, especially if you're stacking them in tournaments. Like take him as the fifth guy, get some value there. Get DeGrom and go from there.
Anybody else on Detroit from the flip side there that, and again, I mean, we have Detroit kind of in the middle, which isn't separated by much, both above and below. So I don't know if there's workability with a lower owned stack here, maybe to pick a player or two off.
I'm not really interested in Detroit just because I think Dunning is a good enough pitcher and he's not getting enough ownership to where I really care. Like if by lock for one reason or another, Dunning's getting like 25% ownership on DraftKings, then maybe I start having some interest in the Tigers just from a leverage standpoint, knowing I can stack a cheap team, knock off 25% of the field if they do well. But right now with Dunning getting like less than 10% ownership, I would rather just be getting more Dane Dunning, I think.
All right, so moving to Houston here, two guys, both in Bassett and Valdez, who 95, Bassett is 9,800 on DraftKings. So you're paying a cost here. Are either one of these pivots for DeGrom, Nola, DeGrom for you?
I'm not really that interested here for a couple of reasons. Valdez has, I think, the more favorable matchup going up against Oakland. It's still a solid offense, but I don't think they're as good as Houston. But the problem is that Valdez isn't nearly as good a strikeout guy as anyone at the top, DeGrom, Rodon, Nola, any of those guys. He only has about a 22.5% strikeout percentage this year. Against righties, it's a little bit lower than that. And you're going to get a right-handed heavy lineup for Oakland. And you're paying a pretty expensive price tag for Valdez. So again, it's not that I think he has a bad game. It's more so that I think I can get similar upside for like $2,000 less. And then really the same thing with Bassett. He's 9,800. I think he's a good pitcher, but this is a Houston team that's running a solid lineup out there. They're tough to strike out. They're a very potent offense. I would rather just get out of that price range, I think, and go cheaper if I'm avoiding DeGrom, avoiding Carlos Rodon, avoiding those guys. I'd rather just get out of the price range than try and have Chris Bassett beat all of them against Houston.
Yeah, so that's it. I mean, it's basically both. And just looking at a projected ownership, Bassett under 1%. So it's not like people are moving to him, it seems, as a strong pivot from either of the two heavy guys in Nola and DeGrom.
Yeah, I agree.
Just based off ownership. So now looking at the offense here in this game, knowing that you're going to pay up for one or either of the pitchers, you meaning not you specifically, Adam, but someone out there would be, is there more interest in flipping this and taking advantage of the stack?
Not really. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of ownership going to either pitcher. I do have some interest in Houston just based on their aggregate ownership. They're projected for less than 1% ownership. They're definitely one of these teams where I think if you just stack them every time they're 1% owned over the course of a baseball season, you probably come out ahead on that play. But it is a pitcher that I have a lot of respect for in Bassett. It's not a stack that I would want to be taking up, a large percentage of my lineups. But I do think that they're a little bit under-owned here and do give you a really high ceiling.
And the same thing for Cincinnati as far as just with Valdez.
You mean Oakland?
Oh, I mean Oakland. Pardon me. Yes, I was looking at Cincinnati and Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean similar thoughts.
Baby mush brain. I'm sorry. Blame it on my kid. I apologize.
You're good. Yeah, similar thoughts with Oakland, but I think not quite as potent an offense. Not quite as easy to, or not. Yeah, just not quite as high an upside offense. High upside of an offense as Houston is. But yeah, same idea. Sub 1%.
Neither one of these. I'm sorry. Neither one of these are really owned. I was going to say super owned. Neither one of these are owned at all. And I wonder if it's. And you mentioned there's value at least where you're not dismissing either one of these pitchers, but I wonder if it's just a casual punch in on like, oh yeah, 9,800, 9,500, where maybe more people are going to them without realizing that you could take advantage of a stack here. And again, it would be more so super under, or you'd be overweight to the field, but it would be, I imagine, a punt here in the scenario of what we have expected for either of them. I was just looking and thinking, wow, both of these stacks are super low owned.
Yeah, and that's why I think they have some merit in tournaments, even though I think both of Valdez and Bassett are very good pitchers. Just because, again, I think there's some merit when these teams, especially Houston, are as low owned as they are, in just betting on the talent that the Astros have in their lineup. Like, they are a lineup that is very capable of going off against any particular pitcher. So in larger field tournaments, there is some merit there. But again, just not a high probability play, I don't think.
Now, with Cincinnati and Kansas City, and looking at Luis Castillo, and we've done a couple of these now, and I don't think with Castillo on the mound, even in a shorter slate, you've rushed to grab him. 8,500 on DraftKings. The opposite is paying super low for a pitcher with Kansas City. Is this more just moving on to offense here?
Yeah, pretty much. If you're playing 150 lineups, mixing in a little bit of Castillo, I think is fine. He's only projected for like 3% ownership, but his strikeout numbers have really dropped off this year. He's done a good job of limiting power, whereas in the past, he would give up home runs and also strike out a ton of guys. So at his price point, again, I typically am just going to want to save a little bit more money, go to some guys that have higher strikeout percentages this year. But there is a part of me that whenever I see Luis Castillo at 3% owned, I think about how good his stuff is capable of being. But again, there's just enough guys that I would be prioritizing ahead of him that I wouldn't expect to get them much. Definitely not interested in Chris Bubic here. He's a good pitching prospect, but hasn't really put anything together in the majors so far, and is going up against what I think is a very, very dangerous Cincinnati lineup here.
The stack, I mean, Cincinnati, if we kind of look at where we have on our top stack tool again, this may be the pivot, right, for both super owned Philadelphia and super owned Toronto would be Cincinnati, where we do have them projected nearly at a 10% to be the top stack, 9.5 technically, if you will, but not even at 5.5% owned. So the numbers seem pretty workable on the surface.
Yeah, I really like the Cincinnati stack based on the numbers we have right now. Bubic this year has allowed a 229 expected ISO to right-handed hitters, 303 to lefties. So I think that there is just a lot of power upside here in general. It looks like it's pretty warm in Kansas City as well. Jonathan India is back in the lineup after being a late scratch yesterday. Tyler Stevenson got a lineup bump up to second with Jesse Winker not starting. So you have this 1 through 6 of India, Stevenson, Castellanos, Votto, Suarez, Aquino, where you get a lot of power there, including Joey Votto, who, is a very good hitter. And as I said, Bubic isn't lights out against lefties by any stretch. And then the other thing that I like is when you look individually at the ownership for Cincinnati, Eugenio Suarez is getting a lot. I think he's one of the top third basemen in cash at only 3,900. Jonathan India is getting a decent amount at 11%, Tyler Stevenson at 9%. But what I really like here is that Nick Castellanos is one of the best bats, if you're ignoring salary, one of the best bats in this lineup, one of the highest upside plays. But because he's $5,700, he's only projected for 2.5% ownership. Joey Votto in the lefty-lefty matchup projected for 0.5%. So this is a team that not only are we projecting their top stack percentage to be higher than their aggregate ownership, but the best hitters in the lineup, Castellanos and Votto, are coming in at extremely low ownership. So it makes me like the stack even more.
Kansas City, and I'm just curious, clearly the cheap option for them is going to bump up their ownership. And you mentioned as far as maybe in 150 lineups, you're going to get to Castillo in a small, super small percentage and not crazy about the strikeout rate. Does that make Kansas City an option, or is it simply because they are so cheap, their ownership has been bumped up maybe to the point where it's not worth it?
So right now they're only getting about 3% ownership, which did come down from this morning. Makes me mildly interested in them because they do have a reasonably good 4.3 implied run total, reasonably good for them at least. And you have some pretty favorable pricing with Benintendi hitting second at 3,200, O'Hearn at 2,800, Dozier 2,500. So it's not a team that I think is very likely to do well. Like I said, Castillo has done a good job limiting power this year. But if you're someone that's playing DeGrom and for whatever reason you just don't want to go to these mid-range guys, let's say you wanted to go like DeGrom, Nola, DeGrom, Carlos Rodon, something like that. It does look like Kansas City is going to be one of the cheap teams that you can do that with that isn't getting a lot of ownership right now. So I think that's the case you would make for Kansas City. If you are comfortable going to those mid-range SP2s, though, I think you get away from Kansas City pretty quickly.
Show today, as we mentioned, brought to you by No House Advantage. You've got a live before lock coming your way, MLB edition at 6 o'clock with Emac and Terry. So we'll continue to get you ready for tonight. And then, of course, the NBA, you want to make sure you're using our free premium tool and data today, the NBA Showdown single game projections. But No House Advantage, as we always tell you, from basketball winding down, baseball in full bloom, about to hit the All-Star break, the NFL, which we're already getting you ready for season long. It's only around the corner. Golf, as yes, the match going on now, but the John Deere to the Open Championship, tons of opportunity for you to win cash prizes on No House Advantage. So take advantage now at NHA. Over 500 player props. The lines are locked in based off projections. Might be injury, might be somebody getting a late scratch, whatever the case may be. The books are going to move, but NHA does not. So you are in control here, and you can take advantage of a $20 deposit bonus with our promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, promo code Awesemo. I know it's a baseball show. I was tempted to pick your brain on a proper two in the NBA. I mean, come on, man. You can't tell me that at least half of your brain isn't focused a little bit on all of the lineups you're running tonight for a showdown.
I'm only playing one, and Giannis is a game time decision, so I've put next to no thought into the lineup yet.
Even if he plays, are you really going to rush to roster him, though?
Well, I'm going to be rushing not to pay $10,500 for Chris Middleton.
There you go. Okay. All right. Look, I stand corrected. I thought it might be 100 and maybe 10 lineups, but it's only one tonight. Baseball is the focus. Look at it. I couldn't even budge you a little bit. I bring up Ice Sniper. We could go on for 25 minutes. I bring up the NBA game tonight. You don't even move.
Yeah. No, haven't. I wrote the deep dive today, so I had to look at the game, but haven't put any thought into lineups. I'll just wait until we get Giannis news.
I love it. Yes. So
let's
move. No, go ahead. I was going to move.
I was going to say there's a couple things. One, I wanted to mention a couple things that came up in chat. One I wanted to mention and I'd forgotten. Jesse Winker not starting for the Reds. While it does bump Tyler Stevenson in the lineup and moves everyone up, it does add some pinch hit risk as well. I think that basically from 6 through 9, if those guys come up in a spot where it's a big spot for the Reds. You could see Winker pinch hit for any of those guys, Aquino through Akiyama pretty much. So not a huge deal, but something to keep in mind. And then also looks like the weather getting a bit worse in the Mets game. So
really?
just keep an eye on that. And obviously that shapes what you're doing with DeGrom.
How does the delay impact what your predicted delay impact anything there? I know you've talked about in some areas like Colorado, we've had this conversation where a rain delay won't really do much. Washington, D.C., it does impact whether or not you would play a game. Here specifically, the game is up at Citi Field. Does the delay impact anything at all with DeGrom to maybe where you can get ahead of the field on something?
I think it's kind of just an absolute mess because there's so many different moving parts. Like if they start the game and then there's a rain delay, you're screwed if you have DeGrom. But you also, like, if they start in a delay and there's a chance for a second delay, you also run the risk of them doing the thing where they just say, yeah, we're not going to play this game because we don't want to waste our DeGrom start, getting 2 innings and then getting another rain delay. So I think, hopefully things kind of clear up and we get more clarity as we get closer to lock. But from what we're seeing right now, I think it's pretty concerning. And if DeGrom's ownership, unless DeGrom's ownership really comes down, I probably would start to pump the brakes. With what we're seeing right now. But again, you have basically an hour and a half to pay attention to this.
All right, let's move to Minnesota. And again, we'll keep an eye on this. You've got Live Before Lock with Emac and Terry coming up at the top anyway. So you'll be completely taken care of with any information from late scratch to weather delay that we should keep an eye on. So let's move to Minnesota. You mentioned here a couple of guys that we're paying up for, one that you referenced earlier in Rodon that you think would be a good option. So where are you tonight with this pitching matchup?
Yeah, I think both pitchers are pretty reasonable. Looks like the weather is looking a little bit better now than it was this morning as well. And then also we got the Minnesota lineup, which I had said this morning I really wanted to see. Nelson Cruz is back. Josh Donaldson is not. So 1 out of 2, in favor of Carlos Rodon. He's still a very, very good pitcher. Comes in with the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate this year at 36.3%, 3.02 xFIP. Again, not in the same world as Jacob DeGrom, but outside of that, basically the best pitcher on the slate. Not an easy matchup against Minnesota by any stretch, but just a very talented pitcher in Carlos Rodon. So I think he's a good option if you are, paying up but not paying up all the way for DeGrom. I think Carlos Rodon looks good. Jose Berrios, I'm fine with as well. He's not as good a strikeout pitcher, but does still have pretty solid strikeout stuff, coming in around 25% on the season. 3.6 xFIP, $8,800, facing a White Sox lineup that doesn't look that imposing today. Adam Eaton leading off, Goodwin batting 4th, Lurie Garcia batting 5th. So there's no Grandal, who got hurt yesterday. I'm trying to figure out who else is missing, though, because this lineup looks a lot worse than normal. But either way, it's not the most imposing White Sox lineup that you're getting. And Berrios certainly does have a ceiling. So I'm definitely interested in both of these pitchers.
Are you interested in either or both of them as I guess, pivot, if it's Rodon slot, normal in maybe cash lineups in FanDuel?
I wouldn't go to either in cash on FanDuel unless we keep getting concerns. Like if the weather in the Mets game cooperates,
right,
absolutely play DeGrom. If DeGrom ends up not being something you can go to, then I think Carlos Rodon is fine.
Tournaments, how about that for either one of these guys, if both?
Yeah, for sure. Rodon right now getting 5% ownership on FanDuel. On DraftKings getting 22%. He has the third highest top 2 percentage on the slate. So I'm fine with Carlos Rodon in any format. I think Berrios in tournaments is fine.
So if you're running with him, are you going to look at the stack here, or is this more about a pitcher? There's going to be some value. The White Sox are going to be cheaper on this bigger slate, but I wonder if they're just better options without having to risk either one of these going up against 2 pitchers that you seem to like.
Yeah, I mean, the White Sox, I guess, are another team that kind of fit that mold where if you're paying up for 2 pitchers, they are cheap because of this lineup. In their top 6, there's 4 hitters that are 3,100 or less on DraftKings, but it's just also not that great of a lineup, and it is a good pitcher in Berrios. One thing to pay attention to again, and this is something that probably not the first thing you're going to think of with the Mets weather, but if Jacob DeGrom ends up not being an option, you're going to see a lot more ownership go to Carlos Rodon, who's already getting sizable ownership at like 22 to 25%. If a large chunk of that Jacob DeGrom ownership goes to Carlos Rodon, I think in large field tournaments you do you should have some interest in Minnesota as a leverage if you're getting 40 to 50% ownership on Carlos Rodon, because this is still a good enough lineup where, you have Polanco, you have Cruz, and then you're kind of just, hoping for the best with these other guys. But you do have the potential to get enough ownership to Rodon where it's kind of interesting. But individually, it's pretty much, Cruz, who we know is hurt also. So not that interested in the bats unless you start getting a lot of ownership going to Rodon.
Now, I do have to right a wrong here, as I've been corrected on chat. And I guess I just assumed Eric is EMAC, but it's Eric Lindquist who is in Live Before Lock tonight. And I just want to make sure that I have the right the right Eric. I'm attributing the right Eric to the show because I don't know. Maybe we lost listeners after I cleared that up. That it's Lindquist and not EMAC. Maybe I was doing you a favor, Lindquist, out there, all right? And baiting people into thinking it was the old bait and switch. They show up Live Before Lock. What shit? He told me he was going to be EMAC. Well, I might as well just stay. That's all. Maybe. I don't know. But it is Lindquist coming up, all right? That's just to make sure. So let's move to L.A., shall we?
Yeah.
All right. Now, we know Ohtani is somebody that you have to – he's basically a pitcher tonight. You can't get his bat. So at 8,300, let's start there. We also have Evaldi, who at 8,900, a little bit higher of a cost there. But let's start with Ohtani. Do you see yourself getting to Ohtani in many tournaments?
I think so. Right now, he was projected for like 45% ownership on DraftKings this morning, which we said was not going to happen. It's down to 21% right now. I'm still not totally buying that. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes down a bit more before lock, but we'll run with that number for now. If that is where it holds, I don't really like it that much in tournaments. Like the upside is definitely there. We know the strikeout stuff Ohtani brings. He has the third highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 32.3%. He also has that 14% walk percentage, and he does have a pretty short leash. Just, we can expect the Angels to pull him pretty quickly if he gets into trouble. It's going up against a very good Red Sox offense. So the ceiling is certainly there. And if his ownership were to come down a lot, I would be saying that I'm very interested in him. But with the ownership where it is, I think it's a good spot to be underweight in tournaments and just, take some chances on other guys. I think you could go there in cash. I still don't really love it. Like he's in my cash lineup right now. I'm kind of hoping he's gone by the time the slate starts. But I think going that route's okay. In tournaments, though, if his ownership does stay where it is, I like the idea of going to the Red Sox, and I like the idea of just using different SP2s.
So, okay, from a stack standpoint, then, is the Angels appealing at all in this matchup?
I don't have any interest in the Angels because you can't use Ohtani as a hitter. And right. So you're taking like one of the only bats in that lineup that you're actually excited to roster, and you're taking it out. But then you're also losing either the leadoff hitter or the number 2 hitter. So it just kind of like disrupts your stack as well. Not really. And I think Nathan Eovaldi is a good pitcher. Jared Walsh is extremely expensive. I don't really have interest in the Angels.
You mentioned Boston, though, and we do have them kind of on that top tier of the middle as far as the top stack percentage. And maybe it's just Ohtani in the name, but they are super low owned. So at 3.8, as far as the predicted stack with 6 teams in front of them, they are less than 1% owned on the slate. And you mentioned as far as getting to them, it seems like not many people have picked up on that.
Yeah, I think that it's a good spot because, I think Ohtani is a very, very good pitcher. We know the strikeout stuff's really good. But again, he's just so capable of getting into trouble quickly by walking guys. And if he does, I think you get into the Angels bullpen pretty quickly, and it gives the Red Sox a lot of upside throughout the rest of the game. And this is a lineup that has a lot of power. Also, we don't have the lineup yet, but it's a team that gives you a nice combination of value and guys to pay up for. Devers, Bogarts, Martinez likely in the middle of the order are very expensive, but you can balance it out with guys like Alex Verdugo, Hunter Renfroe, Christian Vasquez, Danny Santana. That helps to pull down the average salary of your stack. So especially if Ohtani's ownership stays high, I really like the Red Sox. If Ohtani's ownership comes down, I'm still interested in the Red Sox, but they, do move back a little bit because I do think Ohtani's good. And his current ownership projection is an extra reason to go to Boston.
Anyone that we've left off the list on this game before we head to Arizona?
I don't think so.
All right. Merrill Kelly, John Gray. It's kind of opposite where you're getting Gray at like 7,300. Kelly, though. You're going to pay up for that. Is Kelly, we can start there in this matchup. Is Kelly a guy that you look at to get away maybe as a possible pivot on a P2 tonight in tournaments?
It's a really, really good matchup for Merrill Kelly, pitching against the Rockies in Arizona. The Rockies are just a terrible, terrible offense on the road here. The problem is that Kelly is pretty expensive at 9,200. He certainly can give you a good start there, in this spot, but it's just kind of like the chances of him giving you a start at 9,200 that you can't get from one of these $7,500 guys, I think is pretty low. Like if you get 22, 23 points, that's fine, but it's certainly not a guarantee here. And there's a lot of other guys that have better strikeout stuff that are less expensive. So Kelly, I do really like the spot. I just really don't like his price tag. I will say right now he's only projected for 1.5% ownership on DraftKings with a 6.8% top 2 pitcher percentage. So that looks pretty good, but I think I'd be more inclined, the way things look right now, to just be getting to some pitchers that are cheaper than him.
Gray, not even an option, 7,300. He's cheap.
Gray's an option because of the price point and the fact that Arizona's not very good. And he's on the road. The concern is just that John Gray's strikeout stuff really hasn't been there this year. Only 16.8% against left-handed hitters. He's up at 27% against righties. But when you look at this Arizona lineup, the only right-handed bat, excluding Merrill Kelly, is Christian Walker batting fourth. Every other hitter in this lineup is left-handed. So, he certainly could still have success, but it doesn't line up very well in terms of what we've seen from him this year and his splits. And that's something that going back to last year, we've seen as well. Since the start of last season, only a 15.4% strikeout percentage against lefties.
Colorado's going to have to deal with Kelly. You mentioned that matchup that he has, and nobody's owning Colorado tonight. Different team when you move them away from Coors Field, clearly. So I don't know if you're using that as maybe a contrarian play tonight. It's not like they're at the bottom as far as projected stacks. They are kind of right there in the middle, right above Arizona, which we'll get to in a second. But just because they are so low owned and they're not just in the forgotten area of stack, do you have any eyes on Colorado?
Not really, just because they're really bad. They're really low owned, but they have basically the same ownership share as the Astros. They have the same ownership share as the Cubs, the Dodgers. If you're going that route, just play a team that's low owned and hope for the best, I'd much rather go to ones that are actually really, really good offenses.
Then Arizona, looking at where they are, I mean, they're one, if not the cheapest stack on the slate as far as value is concerned. So I imagine that has a lot to do correlating with their high ownership, where people are paying up for two big pitchers, DeGrom, Nola, whatever it may be, the combination of it, and saying, all right, well, I'll just slide in with a stack or half stack of Arizona. 9.6% ownership share is ridiculous for this team, but it makes sense as far as from an economic standpoint. Is that enough, though, as far as a deterrent, or is it maybe just the skill for Arizona that would keep you away based off the rest of the slate you have tonight?
It's a combination of both. The skill is why they only have like a 2% chance of being the top stack. And the ownership, like you said, is because if you just plug projections into an optimizer and say go, you're going to get exposure to Arizona because they're so cheap. So this is the type of team that I pretty consistently just stay away from in tournaments, because they don't have the power upside that makes it really likely that they punish you. Like, for example, the Phillies are over-owned, but they're a team that is still likely to have success. They have a lot of power in their lineup. Here, you've got a decent pitcher in Gray. You've got an Arizona team that really isn't that good offensively, and you're getting a lot of ownership going there. So if you did need to go to teams that, are in that price range, there's some other ones I've mentioned throughout the show that I like, Kansas City, for example, that I think, if you're going to take on a low probability team just because they're cheap, at least go to one that isn't getting a lot of ownership.
San Francisco, Johnny Cueto, Adam Wainwright just over 8K, Johnny Cueto just under 8K. Talked about a couple of guys on this slate so far. Does either jump out as an appeal here, especially in a tournament for a P2?
I'm interested in Wainwright. The strikeout stuff for him has actually been pretty good this year. He's someone that not that long ago, it seemed like was pretty much wrapping up his career and on the way out. But this year he has a 23.3% strikeout percentage, 3.67 xFIP. Just another pitcher, around 8K, pitching in a very, very good park. Looks like it's supposed to be around 55 to 60 degrees in San Francisco. Great place to pitch. The Giants offense has been good this year, but I'm just still not really sold on them. And I think that Wainwright in this park is a reasonable option. Again, as long as the ownership is relatively low. If it comes up, I'm not going to be like, still banging the table for Adam Wainwright here or anything, but at only about 6% ownership on DraftKings, this is someone that I think is in a very good pitching environment. It's harder to get to Cueto just because the strikeout stuff isn't as good. I think the Cardinals offense, while it is streaky, is a little bit more imposing when you just think about the power that's in that lineup. So, more interested in Wainwright than Cueto here, even though it is a great pitching environment for both.
And just looking at, you mentioned the pitching environment, and that's probably the lead here to focus on. That's probably going to be the biggest deterrent to getting to either one of these stacks. Is just, even if you can get to one of these pitchers, you mentioned Cueto, where you're not really sold on the strikeout rate. It's just difficult to score runs.
Yeah, bad park, mediocre offenses, bad hitting weather, decent pitchers. Neither pitcher getting enough ownership to warrant leveraging against them individually. Not really interested in the bats here.
Can you get to anybody from a one-off perspective, though? Because, again, especially if people are looking at the pitching conditions, or really, I should say, hitting conditions, as a deterrent to run stacks here, can you get around that and maybe pick one or two players off on either side to at least get ahead of that from the field?
There's nobody that I think is like a top play at their position or on the slate. But if I had the single guys out from this game, I would point to 3K Alex Dickerson, assuming he's batting cleanup. And I would look to Mike Yastrzemski, who does actually have a lot of power from the left side against Wainwright. The problem is that he's 5K. So, still not a top play for me.
All right, we've got two left. Remember that Cleveland Rays game was rained out. So we've got San Diego and then Seattle hosting games. Remind you here before we get out of here, Eric Lindquist and Terry are going to take you at the top of the hour for Live Before Lock, heading into the slate, this 14-game slate that we've been breaking down. And if you're fortunate enough to make it into the Awesemo Hall of Fame tonight with anything that you can tweet at us, we want to make sure that you can take full advantage of the free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So it's simple. Download the Awesemo profile pic from awesemo.com/avatar. Place in the top three of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. Shouldn't be difficult as you're paying attention to everything going on here. Anyway, tweet the wins at Awesemo HOF, and then you'll get that free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Absolutely amazing here as we keep seeing people pop in. Clay Miller across the board. Just, hey, thank you, Awesemo. Thank you. There you go. Lindquist and Ship My Money DFS. Not bad. Nah, come on, Devin. I appreciate that, but I shouldn't be in the company of Adam and.
You can be in the company of Greg. That's fine.
Greg, you notice I said Adam and Rinpack, right? I didn't throw Ehrenberg in there, not just yet. All right, San Diego hosting your squad here. The Nationals out for a late night game in San Diego. Not really an appealing pitching matchup at all here, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. Ryan Weathers here is someone that on some slates I'd have some interest in just because he's 6,600. He's a relatively highly regarded pitching prospect for the Padres. The Nats lineup is, it's not out, but it's probably not going to be very good. But on this slate, I just think there's enough guys that are a little bit more expensive than Weathers that I would rather go to. And on the other side, it's a bullpen game for the Nats, so certainly not looking there against the Padres.
And even San Diego, and I guess we can start there. If it's the park, if it's just conditions, if it's something specific where I thought I wouldn't look, they're not, it's not like nobody's owning them. They're just over 2% projected ownership for DraftKings we have on our top stacks tool. But are you surprised that we don't have them rated just a little bit higher going up against a bullpen game for the Nats?
Yes and no. I think it's a good spot for them, but it also is just difficult to score runs in bullpen games typically because you're just getting so many different looks at guys. And nowadays, guys out of the bullpen just throw so hard. So that combined with, a 5% chance of being a top stack on a slate with 28 teams is still pretty high. So I think it's a good spot, but I'm not really surprised they're not higher than some of these teams ahead of them.
So are you getting to either of these stacks tonight? I know Washington is right there at the bottom. We don't have them projected for much at all. And granted, it's going to be difficult, but San Diego kind of in the middle. I don't know if there's any real appeal there.
Yeah, I'm not interested in the Nats. I do have some interest in the Padres. I think they're a team that you could get more of too if you decide you're not playing DeGrom or if the weather makes it so you're not playing DeGrom, because then you are just naturally saving money at pitcher and you'll be able to afford Tatis and Machado easier. But yeah, right now they're the fifth highest top stack percentage, only getting about 2% ownership share. So I do think they look pretty good. Not my favorite stack, but they're up there.
Yeah, Washington, just so people could, Milwaukee's the only thing that's stacked below them because of DeGrom. So Washington doesn't even have a 1% chance tonight, according to our top stack tool, of breaking the slate and being the top stack. So what is a better chance of happening? Is it Washington tonight breaking the slate, being the top stack? Or is it Adam going out to Moonlight Basin, where the match is being played right now, and parring that 777-yard par 5?
Neither one's happening, so I'd say they're pretty close.
You don't think you could get a par on that? All you need is a good drive. You put that sucker 350, you're in good shape.
Yeah, go 350, and then I have to hit the next 2 shots straight also.
Fair enough. That's probably even more difficult. Okay, so Seattle, let's lock it down here. We'll get a couple of home run picks before we get out of here. Seattle hosting the Yankees, and I don't know if, again, since we've laid out 13 games so far, 26 pitchers, I don't know if you're getting to either one of these guys in tournaments as far as P2s are concerned.
I do kind of like $7,200 Jameson Taillon here. Not a ton of confidence in him, but I think the matchup's okay from a strikeout standpoint against Seattle. They do have some power in their lineup, and he has struggled with left-handed power this year, but he's struck out about 24% of lefties, 24% of righties, and isn't getting a ton of ownership. Right now, we only have him projected for 8% ownership. So another one of these SP2s that I'm not super confident in, but I do think that their ceiling is relatively high for their salary. Definitely not interested in Justice Sheffield going up against the Yankees.
So if you're not looking at Sheffield at all, and again, 6,800, that would be more of a punt scenario. Yankees stack interest you?
Yeah, it took the entire show, but right now my favorite tournament stack on the slate. We have them with the 4th highest top stack percentage. We have them with a little bit below 4% ownership. Justice Sheffield has not been very good this year. He's only struck out 17.5% of righties. He's allowed a 234 expected ISO. And then you look at the power numbers in this Yankees lineup against left-handed pitching going back to the start of the 2019 season, or in the Yankees projected lineup, I should say. But you have 193 for DJ LeMahieu, 362 for Judge, 263 for Sanchez, 211 for Stanton, 263 for Voit, 231 for Torres, 202 for Urshela. Just power top to bottom in this lineup. And because they are relatively expensive and we might not even have their lineup by lock, you're just going to get lower ownership than you typically would. So really, really, really like going to the Yankees here, assuming that ownership holds where it has been all day.
All right, my friend, anything on the way out home run pick? I gave you Real Muto plus 450 going long. You have one or two for the people?
Joey, I would say Joey Gallo is probably my favorite guy. I have no idea what the line is, but just in terms of matchup, I love Joey Gallo here. I think that Stanton is a really good spot. I think Aaron Judge is in a really good spot.
Apparently, Lindquist is claiming a career of college golf. So he's claiming that he could knock down that par 5, 777. I don't know, man. I'd have to see it to believe it first.
Yeah, I'll say par 5s are normally like my best holes. I think they're most people's, but 777 is a lot.
Awesome, man. All right, well, that's it. Again, make sure you pound that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. When are you back on, man?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. All right, good. Bright and early, right, on a Wednesday morning for the MLB Strategy Show with Greg. And make sure you stay tuned. We have a busy schedule tonight as we'll get you ready. MLB Live before lock with Eric Lindquist and Terry. And then it's Lofty and Josh for the NBA Live before lock. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern. So a lot of content still here on the channel, including nice little PGA taste that you have all here. Make sure you like, subscribe, you hit the notification bell at Ship My Money DFS for Adam, at Shander Show for me. Make sure you thank Jordan on the way out. He'll be here as well, hanging for the rest of the night, but he produced this show. And enjoy the rest of your night.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the MLB Live Before Lock show presented by No House Advantage. I am Eric Lindquist. I am sitting sidecar here next to my guy, Terry McBride. He is Digital B21 on the Twitter sphere. Terry, how is it going over there in New York?
Dude, I thought you were driving. We might go flying off the road here. I don't know. I thought the host did the driving and the analyst was in the sidecar, man. I got to drive this thing now.
Okay. Well, no, you're driving. You're driving. Go.
We get our Erics confused. I mean, we're all over the place. This show's already off the rails. What was that, 5 seconds? Love it. What's going on, man? We're waiting for EMAC. It's fine. He'll get here eventually, and then we'll fire it up. And I just want to see him sweat when he finds out that he was supposed to be on the show. He's not supposed to be on the show. Hello, EMAC, if you're in the chat. He's normally hanging around. But everybody else that is hanging out in the chat, we need to get those likes up. Hit that like button for us. That goes such a long way for us. Hit that subscribe button, because why wouldn't you want to check in with our lovely faces every day, and hit that notification bell. So, when this and all the other content at Awesemo is going live, we will talk about our sponsor, No House Advantage, here a little bit, but we've got a big 14-game slate to be looking at. I guess we just start at the top because we have weather concerns. And fortunately for us, we've got El Negro Loco there in the chat, our guy, the news god. He will be keeping you apprised. He's got like 94,000 tabs up right now, checking weather in New York, checking everything, making sure that we are putting the best information we possibly can out there to figure out what to do with one Jacob deGrom, because if things are good to go there, you want Jacob deGrom in your life. And if not, obviously that is a massive amount of salary to allocate to a guy for a zero. But Terry, what are you planning to do with one Jacob deGrom tonight? So I was just telling you before the show, I mean, for me, I'm only playing one lineup tonight. I jumped into the big FanDuel one, and I'll throw away a big entry fee on that one and enter a terrible lineup with a terrible pitcher in it. But that pitcher is not Jake deGrom. So if he gets washed off the slate, I actually don't mind it that much, because then I'm not dealing with the opportunity cost of not playing Jake deGrom. I think it's a massive, massive inflection point for the slate as a whole, though, right? If you're entering 150 lineups, a gigantic portion of my lineups, if I was entering a full slate, would have been Jake deGrom. I think he's easily the clear-cut best pitcher on the slate, in an amazing spot. His projection for me in my model is absolutely absurd today. I don't even want to say how high it is, because it's just a laughably high number. If he gets that projection, he blows the doors off of everybody else on the slate. And if you don't have him, we can go to bed. I think the upside is probably, more in line with like a little bit higher than maybe what Alex has him projected for, in that like mid 40s of a median projection, with upside toward where my projection is maybe. But I just think he's by far worth paying for. He's by far the most likely pitcher, assuming that game plays dry, to give you a monster start. And that's including comparing him to guys like Nola, like Rodon, like Framber, the somewhat similarly anyway, price guys. On FanDuel, you throw Bassett and Eovaldi into that bucket as well. They're both over 10 grand as well. It's just a matter of if it goes dry. Right now, it got like overcast, cloudy, one of those days where it's hot and humid all day here and you can feel the rain coming. It's just a matter of, I think last I saw, it was one's going to get here right before game time, and then now there's another cell behind it, which if they get that delay and then they bring them back and then there's another delay, that's it for the start. They might not bring them back after a first delay. If it's a delayed start to the game and they just wait 2 hours, start playing it after all the rain passes and he goes from the top, then maybe we get a good start. But then you're also playing with the idea of maybe we just don't want to monkey around with deGrom, have him stop and start a few times, get ready, sit down, and maybe they just don't pitch him at all and just go to a bullpen game, let him start tomorrow. So there are so many variables. I just don't want to sink a ton of cost into Jake deGrom right here.
So my question, I guess neither one of us are playing 150 tonight. I try not to on Live Before Lock show, try to do the normal 150
That's
thing.
why I decided
yeah, I was going to say the three max stuff. So for us, it's pretty easy to just say, you know what, we won't screw with deGrom in this situation here today. But if you're making 150 max, I would find it very difficult to not still want to have a little bit of him in the event that something were to happen where this game ends up going. If we see delay before that game, yeah, I get really, really nervous. I know that it looks like there's two waves that are coming in. There's a wave on the front end, a possible rain that's going to be hanging around in the middle of the game. Again, I'm not a weatherman. I'm just looking at the kind of things that I do for my golf research where, you're trying to figure out which draw of the tee times might work out better. And for this, we're just looking at, is there enough rain that's going to fall to make this an issue? And obviously
I think
there definitely
question there then is how frequently do you get wet while golfing?
A lot.
Okay.
I mean, it depends. Yeah, it depends. Right, so but here's the thing: you can still play golf, and you can still play some golf in some rain and some light rain. That's not an issue. Baseball, it gets a little bit past a drizzle, and you've got issues because these are guys getting paid millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not going to want to mess with DeGrom. We've already seen DeGrom get a few shortened starts based on wonky injuries and just weird stuff going on this season. So they just don't want to mess with this guy, particularly now that they're getting better. They're kind of in the mix and have their eyes on the postseason, have their eyes on who they might acquire at the trade deadline. They don't want to lose the best starter in baseball before heading into the trade deadline and figuring out what their options are. So they're going to be very careful with DeGrom. There's a few pitchers that are being managed. He's not being managed. It's not like they've got him on a pitch count, but as far as the weather concerns go and whether they let him stop and start and stuff like that, we've seen too much throughout baseball history for them to want to tangle with that, I think, here. But the spot's spectacular. I mean, he's going up against the confirmed lineup with a 26.8% strikeout rate combined. He's got a 45.3% strikeout rate over 85 innings this year. He's by far the best pitcher in baseball. 21.7% swinging strike rate. That's comparable to other guys' full strikeout rate. It's just insane. So, I mean, he is absolutely the apex pitcher in baseball and on this slate if it's dry.
Yeah, if it's dry. And we've got Loco there in the chat. He's looking out for you. He said the later they wait, the higher the PPD risk, basically. I think that that's probably the right way of looking at it. If I see the words delay, I think it's probably a hit eject button. If we don't get that, I think that it's just such a high ceiling. I don't think people are going to not own Jacob deGrom still. I think he's been written up everywhere. He's been talked about by everybody. I think it might be a nice spot to just hit eject completely, especially if there is that risk of a couple innings in, him getting pulled, not coming back out. He does have all those small injury issues that kind of pops up. It's a back, it's this, it's that. So I think that they will be very careful, but we should keep it on moving. I know Jacob deGrom is just a huge talking point of the slate as we're getting going here. So I wanted to address that right off the bat. Looking at the rest of the top pitchers tool, it becomes Carlos Rodon, Aaron Nola, kind of your next two guys in line on both sides, on DraftKings, on FanDuel as well, where they're sitting at 10-6 and 10,000. Who would you be rolling with in the event of Jacob deGrom getting wiped out?
I have those guys side by side at the top of my projections here. There's one name between them and deGrom, and that's Ian Anderson, actually, for the matchup against Pittsburgh. So I really like him for the money. But as far as these guys go, I've got them separated by about a half FanDuel point. So I would have a good mix of them. It would probably just end up with Nola, just because I think it's a little bit better of a matchup going against the heavier strikeout Cubs than the low strikeout Twins, and he's 600 less on the FanDuel slate. So I think that makes sense. 300 less on DK, similar kind of a story. So I think it would be Nola if I'm just, picking one of these two guys, but it's very, very close in terms of where my projection's at. I love the 3.5% ownership on Nola on FanDuel, though. This is an upside spot for strikeouts, 26.5% strikeout rate for the confirmed Cubs lineup. A lot of strikeouts toward the back end with Ian Happ in there. Sergio Alcantara up over 30%. Javi Baez, everybody knows, strikes out like crazy. He hits a lot of home runs, but strikes out 36.9% rate this year. So they're not a good team in terms of limiting strikeouts against righties. Upside spot here for Nola. He's pitching 29.4% strikeout rate. People are mentioning, it's down a little bit from last year, but if we take last year's 30 some odd low 30s% rate off the board for his career, this 29.4 would be his career high. So he's pitching very well. 12.9% swinging strike rate, a 3.33 xFIP. Love everything about Aaron Nola here. So he'd be my choice between the two, but Rodon profiles very well. It's just throwing him into those Twins who are very good against lefties, have a little bit more power, strike out a little bit less than the Cubbies do.
We'll go down the rest of the board here in a second, but we got Steve Buzzard. We have a GOAT sighting in the chat, so I thought I would at least point it out here for a quick second. He's giving a shout out to Gavin Lux. If you guys check out the new MLB player props tool, I know I talk about it a lot on some of these shows, but home run props and strikeout props that are available to you here at Awesemo Plus. He's got his pick, Gavin Lux, fantastic value, expected ROI of 23%. You can literally go directly onto the page. You can go to shop odds at Odd Shopper. You can see that he's got odds of plus 910 at a sports book that I shall not say, that shall remain nameless. You can go in YouTube chat and read it. But I definitely think that is a fantastic spot to go to. Sal Perez as well, going at plus 430, another fantastic spot to be utilizing. This stuff is free right now. We have a free trial going for some of this MLB player prop tools. If you use the NBA player prop tools, this thing was, it was just so profitable up and down for points, rebounds, assists. It did a phenomenal job. This MLB player props tool is going to be doing the same thing, finding value in these home run picks, in the strikeout numbers as well. If you click over to strikeouts, producer Jordan's got it up there on the screen. We've got Jose Barrios over a 5.5. Looks like a fantastic spot, a spot where our projections are very bullish on it. It would make sense that the over on 5.5 would be a great expected ROI number, and it sure enough is. So these are the kind of things that can really, really help be additions to your DFS bankroll. So check those out for sure. Continuing down the board for pitching, is there anybody else that really kind of sticks out in this mid-range? We kind of get down to Jose Barrios, Shohei Ohtani, Framber Valdez. I thought I was going to get to a little bit more of in my allotment of lineups. I don't have any shares, which makes me feel a little bit strange because you look at some of his peripherals on the season, he's just kind of jumping up in a meaningful way, but don't really necessarily want to be going there today on this slate up against Oakland, a pretty potent offense. And then Merrill Kelly as well. Is there anybody in that mid-range that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, I like each of those guys. Framber probably the best, but he's also the most expensive, I think, out of those guys that you named there. It's a good group of pitchers. What I love about Framber is his ability to avoid premium contact in terms of keeping the ball on the ground. He's got a 70-some-odd% ground ball rate on the season so far. It's a 45 and a third inning sample, so it's not the biggest sample. That'll come down, but that's just stellar. Average launch angle, negative 6.7 degrees on the season. So guys are hitting the ball hard. It's a 44.8% hard hit rate, but they're hitting it straight into the ground. They're only barreling the ball 3.2% of the time. So everything's on the ground. Everything's toward his defenders. I like that. I think he caps the upside here for these home run hitting A's, but I don't love the 22.4% strikeout rate that he's got for this season and the 22.6% strikeout rate that they've got as the opponents. So it's a good spot for him in terms of they probably don't light him up here. Maybe they score 3-4 runs, just some sequential hitting. I don't see the A's coming out here and hitting 4 home runs against them. But I also don't see him coming out here and striking out 10 A's and giving us 7 innings of shutout ball or something like that. So it's kind of pushing me off, though. The appealing part would be the ownership. 1.7% ownership. That's easy enough to go several multiples of the field at the 10-2 price that, it's hefty, but it's less than Rodon, less than DeGrom, less than some of these other guys. So I think there's logic in getting to some shares of them. Similar story at 7.1% ownership on DK. That's just playable in just spreading out some of the ownership shares. I think we see it spike a little bit if DeGrom scratches. A lot of that ownership will probably go to Framber in addition to Rodon, who will get, I think, probably the most of it. And then Nola in there as well.
Yeah, and on DK, I mean, it becomes the 8K range with Barrios, with Ohtani. I would say Barrios at 8,800. If people are going to be worried about some of the rain concerns in that game, perhaps you're seeing a little bit lower ownership. He's under 10% over on DK, and we've got him with an 11.7% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. I think that's definitely a spot to invest. Obviously, this is a team that can definitely cause issues with so many lefties up and down this lineup. A good win. Lourdes Gurriel, I believe, is a switch hitter here in this spot. Yes, he is indeed. Adam Eytan now leading off in this spot. Gavin Sheets. I mean, Adam Eytan in the leadoff spot, interesting cash kind of consideration there as well. But Jose Barrios really kind of sticking out on the top pitchers tool. So definitely be checking that as well. The guy I want to talk about, and I'm not sure what you think about him today, but I'm going to be rostering an uncomfortable amount of Dane Dunning. Now,
yes. I was hoping you'd say that.
All right, the Detroit Tigers. Yeah, well, good. We get to lose together. That's exciting.
Remember when I said I was rostering a terrible pitcher in my FanDuel lineup?
Yep. Well, here we go. That's the guy. I like that you just went, yay, Dane Dunning. He's never gotten that reaction even from his parents. So there's that. Dane Dunning, he's 7,400 over on DK. I would say that it's a price play, but it's really not even that. Detroit is 13-7 in their last 20 games. They have been so much better in the last 3 weeks. They've got bats, whether it's Akil Baddoo, who doesn't hit the ball hard, but at least gets on base, walks at a high clip here. You've got other guys up and down this lineup. Eric Haas, we know, has a bunch of power potential. He's not in the lineup today. And as soon as I kind of saw that there were some opportunities there, you got Zach Short batting 7th, Willie Castro 8th, Jake Rogers 9th. I mean, this lineup is not imposing in its current iteration whatsoever to me. I see the roof's now closed. Dane Dunning is going to be in a large majority of my lineups, and apparently he's going to be your one pitcher over on FanDuel today. So talk about him a little bit for me.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. That is the definition of an uncomfortable play. What it gets me to is stacks that include lineups like the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, these teams that we really want to get to on this slate, these teams that are profiling at the top of the stacks board. And I'm talking about the premium bets. So you're not saying, all right, I'm rostering Blue Jays, but I'm rostering Danny Jansen, Lourdes Gurriel, you know, the 7, 8, 9 hitters in the lineup. You can get 2 premium bats. And I think this is a sneaky good spot for Dunning. He's a pitcher who his xFIP has been better than his ERA all year long. He's pitching to a 3.60 xFIP. His ERA is in the mid-4s, so people are not, you know, necessarily considering him a good pitcher. 24.3% strikeout rate, a little bit above league average, around league average. 8.3% walks. Few too many guys on base. 151 WHIP. So it's not safe by any means, which is why we're saying it's an uncomfortable position to be in. But a 6.5-degree average launch angle keeps the ball in the yard fairly well. 6.9% barrel ball rate is, it's okay. You'd like it to be better. So that's trending in the wrong direction. But with the launch angle and an 88.9 mile an hour average exit velocity, he's decent at keeping the ball in the park. And to your point, without Haas in there, it takes the upside out of this lineup in terms of the home run hitters. You've still got Jonathan Scope, who's a decent home run hitter, but he's profiling well under that magic 10 number in my home run model here. I'm just not seeing a lot of threat coming back against him. And I'm seeing the worst strikeout team in the league against right-handed pitching, second worst at 26.2%, just making their lineup worse with some of these hitters that they're putting in here today. So there's upside for Dunning on this slate. He's a better strikeout pitcher than he's done so far this year by maybe a little bit. And I think he's just a better pitcher overall than we're seeing in numbers like his WHIP and like his ERA. So given the park factors, given everything about this opposing lineup and what he can buy you bats-wise, I think he's very much in play. And it's not a major sacrifice in terms of the upside potential, for at least in terms of my projections, for everybody except for Jake DeGrom. And like I said, Jake DeGrom is basically at a ceiling projection for reasons that I didn't take time to look into because it was just Jake DeGrom against the Brewers today. So everybody but him is basically within range of where I've got Dunning, where that salary buys me so much that I don't care about the handful of points difference.
If we go down, then we go down together. Nobody wants to hear me sing on Live Before Lock. That's not a thing.
A little Billy Joel?
Oh, no, I think it's what is that band? I can't even remember. I was
thinking Billy Joel's like Vietnam song about we would all go down together.
Yeah, no, it's maybe a knockoff of such things. I believe it's the Chainsmokers, but do not quote me on such things. I can't remember. We got Jordan trying to figure it out here. Chat's going to let me know in like 5 seconds. It's not going to be that
relatively
difficult.
sure Billy Joel was a chain smoker at some point. So
he definitely was. Before we talk about some of these other crapper pitchers, guys that we can possibly take shots on, I just want to talk about Awesemo Plus tools and content. $29.95 right now to get a weekly pass to get yourself in the door. That includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, which are free today. Definitely be checking out the MLB player projections. That's going to go a long way for you. Ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and more. And if you're new to Awesemo Plus, right now, you can take advantage of 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That is promo code MLB Live Before Lock. All one words caps. Just run them all together. MLB Live Before Lock, 25% off. And if you just want MLB DFS goodies, $15.95 for the MLB weekly package, but you're pretty much getting close to that with the 25% off. So go for the whole shebang. I think that's a good way to kind of get it done. Stop guessing and start winning, and joining Awesemo Plus today is a great thing. Also, if you do want to try to have a shot at an entire year of Awesemo Plus Platinum right now, head to at Awesemo_com. That is on Twitter, on the Twitter spheres, for a chance to enter the $1,000 yearly pass giveaway that we have going. All you have to do is pick whether Chris Paul or Devin Booker will score more points tonight. And one random guesser is going to get picked out to win the pass. It's a 50-50 shot. And actually, I would just be taking Devin Booker. Do you have a lean on that one whatsoever, Terry?
I'll just take the other side and say Chris Paul because I didn't actually hear what the contest was.
All right, you're contrarian as all heck, so there's that. No, it's great.
I had one more note on Dane Dunning that I wanted to make, and I was looking at that, so my attention was sorry.
I will let you come back to it. I'm super, super excited, but I want you all to head to at Awesemo_com. Make sure you take advantage of that giveaway that we have going. So that's a little better than paying 25% off. That's a chance to win a free pass. Definitely check it out. But back to the pitchers here that we have on this slate. Dane Dunning, last closing notes on this guy, because, oh man, we have talked about him probably more than his parents as well.
Yeah, we're way over enthusiastic about this guy. I did just want to clean up. He's been pitching on a lot of short outings. They've been kind of managing his innings, but it's for example, his last outing, he faced 18 hitters against Oakland, right? So he went through the lineup exactly 2 times. Instead of starting the 5th inning with the rookie going through the lineup the 3rd time, throwing him into premium power like Matt Olson from the left side of the plate, they pulled him. They took him out. Other games he's pitched at, he's seen 22 hitters, 24 hitters. So he's seeing a relatively fair amount of hitters, and it's just a matter of how he stretches it out over innings, how efficient he is. But it's worth noting that his last 9 starts in reverse order came against Oakland, Kansas City, Minnesota, the Dodgers, Tampa Bay, at Colorado, at Los Angeles Angels, against the Yankees, and at Houston. That's a tough run of teams. So I just feel like if there's an opportunity where they're going to say, all right, kid, give us a couple more innings tonight, give us 6 tonight against the Tigers, this is kind of the spot that they're going to do that. So to me, I take that hopefully out of the equation. Maybe I'm just trying to talk myself into it.
You know what? Sometimes that's the best process, is just kind of like randomly being like, you know what? I really like this price point. Please work for me. And, that can get you in danger sometimes, but also Absolutely. I have access to a lot more bats than the average human. What was that?
Yeah, exactly. And that's like I was saying with Dunning, that's all that it is I'm getting to the stacks I want, but more to the point, I'm getting to the bats within those stacks that I really want. Because it's not just the laundry. You don't just want the Yankee uniform. You want the actual premium hitters if you can get them. The sky's just opened here in Jersey City. So we are, I'm going to call it like 5-6 miles due west of Queens. So This is probably similar. The wind looks like it really picked up. It's dark outside all of a sudden, and the rains are coming down now. So,
oh man. All right. Well, hopefully we get some news quickly on that. That would be a good thing. One thing we did get some news on, Eric Fetty. Eric Fetty's in our lives today. He's going to be pitching for the Washington Nationals. So we got a starting pitcher finally announced over for that game going up against the Padres. I think that I was already going to have interest in your bats and making the Padres a team that I definitely want to stack up. That will not change. Also, we just got official news. The Brewers and Mets will be delayed due to rain. So I am going to be removing my Jacob deGrom exposure here. Again, News Guy does all of the work for us here. He's going to be verifying all the goodies here, but I just got that alert from the Mets, so I'm very excited to not be rostering Jacob deGrom here at the moment because I think that it's probably going to be somebody who still garners some ownership. That game locks is the very first game. It's in that first window, I guess. It's at 7:10 p.m. Eastern time. I guarantee you Jacob deGrom's not going to be like completely unowned and like maybe the $18 on DK. I bet he's still, at least even if they delay this or whatever else, he's still going to be 25% owned, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. There'll be people riding that weather projection that said, hey, maybe they delay and then late start and come up. If they were looking at what I'm looking at in terms of how dark it got out here in the last 15 minutes and how much this wind picked up and everything, I don't know. I mean, this might blow through fast, but with the idea there's more coming behind it, it's dicey.
Terry McBride, are you God? I mean, you basically said that the skies were opening up and the delayed message came in immediately. So
that's right.
There is that. You're controlling the weather. Also, it's so great to have you for all the New York weather because that's always going to be hitting environments and pitching environments we're going to have interest in. But let's get ourselves on over to the stacks. This is where we're going to be making our hay here today. Looking on the top end, let's just start with it. Toronto Blue Jays, Philadelphia Phillies. Which side of it are you going to take between these two massively owned stacks?
For me, I'm coming down a little bit more on the Blue Jays side of things. I'm getting really good home run marks up and down that lineup, where for the Phillies, it's more concentrated. I'm getting good marks, but it's the best ones are more concentrated on like the obvious hitters. And I feel like the obvious hitters are drawing maybe a little bit more ownership in the overall, or maybe just like the names I really want to get to or how my lineup came together. So I kind of like what the top end of the Blue Jays lineup is giving me with a little bit lower overall ownership between Semien, Bichette, Vlad Guerrero, George Springer. And it's got weight in like Teoscar Hernandez, Kevin Biggio toward the back end of the lineup where those guys are coming in at just great values. 2,700 for Biggio is a really reasonable price. He's struggling 232, 341, 376. The on-base percentage is fine, doing a lot of what you'd like him to do. The hit tool's just not been there, and the power's not been there. 144 ISO so far this season. But he's a very good player. He's shown us more than that. So that's a discount price there. I like getting to that. It's a different story on DK, where you're getting Biggio, you're getting Teoscar at low ownership. Springer's under 10%. Bo Bichette is around 5%. They're just super expensive over there. They're a little bit easier to snap together on the FanDuel slate, I think, with the pricing. It's expensive, but it's more in like maybe like the lower end of the top tier or the upper end of the middle tier for some of these guys. So I prefer the Blue Jays side. The Philly side are probably the easier team to put together given the pricing on FanDuel and actually on DK as well, where a lot of them are in that middle 3,000s range. So I like the ability to put them together, but I like the back end less, and I like the ownership on the guys that I do like a little bit less.
Yeah, so ownership started to flatten out. This morning when I did the strategy show with Adam, we had the top 3 stacks that all had some positive leverage, whether it was Toronto, whether it was Cincinnati. Cincinnati is still the one that we're getting some leverage to. I'm going to be siding a little bit with them. It's not great to not see Jesse Winker in that lineup. That's not going to be a great start, is to remove, I don't know, maybe one of the best hit. Well, yeah, definitely a top 2 hitter. You can put him and Castellanos together, different sides of the plate. Still love getting to Castellanos. Tyler Stevenson as well. What a great catcher option today, where you have to play a catcher over on DK, 4.1K. A little bit expensive, but I think it's pretty doable on this slate as well. Up and down that entire lineup, I love getting to them. Next on the board, we've got the Yankees, 7.4% top stack percentage. Also some positive leverage. Another team that I really like. I think that there's some ways to get off of Toronto and Philly and kind of go that direction, but considering we are getting positive leverage on Toronto, it's like, just give me that. I'll find a way to make that work with one Dane Dunning, of course. But is there a lean you have between Cincinnati and New York today?
Ooh, wow, 2 teams I really like a lot. I'd say I'm going to make the assumption that the Yankees are going to roll out something that looks like their regular lineup. So LeMahieu, Judge, Sanchez, Stanton, Voit, Torres. And then I don't really care too much about Urshela, Andujar, and Castro at the end. So if it's Brett Gardner, whatever. But the premium hitters, the guys up top, the 1 through 6, I think I would prefer that a little bit better, just based on the Reds taking Winker out for the lefty and having Aristides Aquino, who's got a ton of power in there, but just a little bit of a less proven hitter than some of the guys that the Yankees are rolling out. You could easily argue that Gleyber Torres is equally unproven, has had similar flash in the pan kind of seasons, and is similarly struggling. And Aquino's doing it in a smaller sample and has more home runs already. I really like Nick Castellanos in there with Joey Votto. Jonathan India, Tyler Stevenson up top don't really wow me, but I get it, and including them in a red stack is definitely important. But it's a diminished Reds lineup without the usual configuration there. That said, it makes sense that they took Winker out. 88 plate appearances against lefties this season. He has a .053 ISO compared to his .321 against righties. So just all his power comes from the right side of the plate. In this particular lefty-lefty matchup, I think they probably could have gotten away with throwing him out there and hoping for a little bit of upside, but they did what they did.
Yeah, and so now he's going to be pitch hitting for Aristides Aquino, and those lineups are going to be dead. So very excited for that. So if you want to take the risk of it, obviously Aquino is a guy who can go yard at 3.3K. It's 90 degrees there in Kansas City, 50% humidity, winds blowing out to left, up against a bad lefty in Chris Bubik. So there's that. It's just going to be frustrating when that happens in the second inning or third inning or something, when there's a rally and they take out Chris. So that's already something I'm looking forward to. Looking around the rest of this board, is there a team that's going under-owned? Because San Diego, for me, is going way, way under-owned, especially now that we know it's Eric Fetty. I'm pulling up some of his FanGraph stuff, but I'm curious, what do you think about some of these other stacks on the board in the mid-range?
Yeah, San Diego was an interesting one to me throughout the day. They popped in my home run model when at one point in the day we thought it was Jeffrey Rodriguez going, and now we've got Eric Fetty, and it's not seeing that much of a difference between those two in terms of my projection and my model. So I like this team. I like the upside of getting to them. They're not drawing, I don't think, like you said, kind of the attention that they should be. On the FanDuel ownership, at least of my last update, $2,300 Will Myers, by far the highest owned player on this team. Will Myers has a lot of talent for $2,300. I don't argue with that whatsoever. But I don't necessarily need him when I can get to a combination of like Trent Grisham, Fernando Tatis, Cronenworth, Machado, Hosmer, and those guys at the top of the lineup, all well under like 5% owned. So put those guys together for me. I'll definitely take shares of Will Myers at the heavy ownership as well, because everybody else is so low. Between the pricing, the ownership, and the upside for this team, yeah, absolutely. Sign me up. And everything there except for the ownership on Will Myers carries over to the DK slate. Fernando Tatis pulling the most ownership over there despite a $6,200 price tag. That's kind of interesting. I wouldn't like that as like a one-off. That's paying way too much for him and carrying way too much weight as a one-off at that price tag. So I don't love that, but everything else about the Padres stack on DK I like.
And then looking around the rest of the league, I mean, there's so many directions that you can go. If you're building 150, you kind of want to condense it a little bit. But I mean, there are spots like even Minnesota going up against a phenomenal lefty in Rodon. I mean, Rodon has been just fantastic this year, but getting Nelson Cruz in as a one-off, or, maybe piecing together some of those other hitters. Baltimore, I think, is probably going a little bit over-owned, but still in a good spot there. In Camden, going to be going up against Steven Matz. Surely you can go this direction. There's so many contrarian ways to go. Is there one that really sticks out to you today?
So Adam was making the point on the other show, and it bears repeating now that we're getting some weather around DeGrom. If people are flocking off of DeGrom, it's pretty likely that we'll see Rodon's ownership spike a little bit in the next little while. Depending on how high that goes, it was at 23% earlier for DK. If he starts trending into like that 40-50 territory, I absolutely think it makes sense what Adam was saying to grab some of these twin stacks just as to be contrarian and to throw it right in the face of that Rodon ownership. The Twins can absolutely get to him. He's been spectacular. 36.3% strikeout rate on the season, 0.94 whip, 15.6% swinging strikes induced, 3.02 xFIP. There's nothing not to like about that. The Twins are just really good at hitting baseballs and really good at hitting lefties. If you can tell, I'm trying to find what I had in here. Let's see. Minnesota, 4.41% home run rate, ranks third best in baseball in the split against lefties. 191 team ISO, second only to Atlanta's 195. Straight runs 8% better than average, and strikeout just at 22.8% against lefties, which is one of the better teams in the league. So it's just not a great upside spot for Rodon, and there's potential that they could do damage against him. So I kind of think that the off-the-board Twins are pretty interesting from that perspective. Even if he doesn't get extremely heavy on the ownership, I think it makes sense taking out a few contrarian stacks against him there. We talked about the Padres. The Braves were popping on my board a little bit as well, and I don't think they were getting that much ownership potential. Let me click back over them. They're getting some. So around like Ozzie Albies and then maybe Austin Riley and Dansby Swanson on the FanDuel slate. But Acuna's not drawing that much. Freddie drawing some. So they're a mid-range team, I guess, in terms of where the ownership's at on FanDuel. I like it better on DK where they're trending below 10% across the board. A little difficult to get to in terms of the price. They're going up against a nothing pitcher in Chad Kuhl, 17.3% strikeout rate on the season over 45 and a third with 5.61 xFIP. 1.46 whip, only inducing 9.9% swinging strikes. Just plenty to attack with the Atlanta bats there, and this is just an extreme upside team in the right spot.
Before we get to the one-offs, before we get to some home run picks, and before we answer all the questions, we've got some good ones that are coming into YouTube chat. Hit us up here in the premium Slack as well. I'll be jumping over there to be able to help out, ask you questions that you can give to Terry, to myself. We'll be able to help you out here. Let's talk about our sponsor, No House Advantage. They are taking a different spin on daily fantasy. They offer player prop contests across NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA, all for cash prizes. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it so much easier than traditional sites to go out and win real cash compared to, the DraftKings and FanDuels of the world. 500 player prop offerings. No House Advantage is the largest provider of player props in the industry. And the best part is that all users today for the NBA Finals, both new and existing, will get a $20 deposit bonus with the promo code Awesemo. All you got to do is go in, deposit $20, and you get $20 of free cash to be playing on the site right now. It is hard to beat that deal, so download it in the App Store and win big with player props today. I've been talking a little bit about my MLB strategy for playing over there. I think targeting the half hits and the 1.5 hits. So if you can find the over on some of the 0.5 hits, it's basically a 1-4, 1-5 spot, especially when you're going up against a gas can. There are a number of those available. And then the 1.5 hits, shorting those, even if it is against a gas can in spots. I mean, for a player and a small sample to go 2 for 5, of course, they can obviously do it. But hitting 400 is not going to be sustainable. So I will definitely take less than, especially if they have a bad expected batting average. How do you feel about those strategies, Terry?
Yeah, I really like it. It's something we've touched on a couple of shows we've done, and I'm with you 100%. It's a great way to approach it, just in terms of good hitters and good spots. And we're talking about guys like, Whit Merrifield, who just has a really good hit tool, ability to get on base. And pick off guys like that when they're against bad pitchers, and look to the guys at the top of the lineup who are going to get you those multiple plate appearances. Additional bites at the apple in a bet like that are just so valuable. So absolutely there. And then, yeah, to your point, nobody hits 400, right? It hasn't happened since Ted Williams in 1950 for them. So yeah, I think that's a viable approach over the long term. If you're making that bet again and again and again, you're going to hit more often than not. So that's a pretty good approach. I like it a lot.
Awesome. We've got a couple questions. I just want to fire them off. A couple of the first things that I see here. John Gray as a decent SP2. That's from Gordon Powell in the chat.
John Gray, 7,300. I assume we're talking about, SP2. So we're talking about DK. I don't get a great projection on him. He's coming up kind of in the middle for me. He's a pitcher that, he's a talented guy overall, but his numbers kind of suffer in general from pitching at Coors Field a lot of the time. Just pulling up Arizona, their opponent, they're a below average team across the board. So you're getting a 24.6% opposing strike rate, which is 10th worst in baseball, a 2.47 home run rate, which is one of the worst marks on the entire board, actually the worst mark against right-handed pitching, a 137 team ISO. So there's not a lot of threat there against him. It's just for the money, I think there are more trustworthy options. Like I greatly prefer, well, I'm thinking in terms of FanDuel pricing. So let me pull a DK price. Like I greatly prefer Dunning, who we've talked up a little bit at 7,400 as compared to the 73 for John Gray. So if you get an extra $100 that you can squeeze out there, I would make that pivot a lot of times out of 100. The matchup is similar in that Dunning's going up against Detroit. I just think it's a better spot for Dunning, and I think he's the more talented kid out of these two at this point. So that would be my lean. Do you have a different opinion? Would you be going to a lot of John Gray here?
I mean, if I'm trying to make the case for him, a 35.2% hard hit percentage, this is one of the best matchups you can possibly have in baseball in the Arizona Diamondbacks. Looking at their lineup, I mean, Rojas, Peralta are neither are that intimidating to me whatsoever. Starting it off, Pavin Smith in the 5-hole. I mean, Escobar is your one guy, 4.6K over on DK that could cause some issues there. Stephen Vogt has some power playing catcher here today as well. I mean, they played a bunch of lefties up here against John Gray, and he does have issues against lefties, but I'm not really seeing it here. Roof closed. I mean, I don't really see a reason that I would want to go to a crazy amount of him. But as I said, for the season, 35.2% hard hit percentage keeps the launch angle down 6.2, but only a 20.6% K percentage on the season. Yeah, I don't necessarily see it for me.
Yeah, the strikeout percentage at 20.6, and then with the confirmed Diamondbacks lineup, we bring their overall strikeout percentage down to 23.1. David Peralta in there at 16% helps, and Pavin Smith at 18.7% helps. So the strikeout upside is really, really capped. You're just walking that line of, I'm trying to get to a quality start bonus. Well, it's not FanDuel, so you're not even getting the quality start. You're basically walking the line saying that the worst team out of these two terrible teams is going to win this game on the road, and John Gray is going to get a win bonus, get through 6 clean, and maybe give you a few strikeouts. I don't love it. I think there's better spots.
Jets World in the premium baseball chat. These are always the questions that I feel comfortable with. He said $762 single bullet GPP on DK. To DeGrom or not to DeGrom? Just the question we all want to know, Terry. I mean, somebody just said also in the premium chat, Pedro O'Rourke said, I'm in Queens, New York, and looks like a tornado is about to touch down. That's going to make me lean on no DeGrom.
Yeah, hopefully that tornado goes like right up the Hudson or the East River and misses all the buildings that are between me and whoever said that over in Queens. Quite a few of them, but yeah, it looks like that's still out here in Jersey City. It's coming down. It's gray. It's not improving. I would probably look to pivot if I was building that lineup. I told you I bought into the one of the larger buy-in single bullets on FanDuel myself and didn't go DeGrom on FanDuel, and that was earlier before it started raining. So I'm comfortable with getting away from him anyway. Despite the massive upside, despite the potential for opportunity cost. When we throw in all these monkey wrenches with the weather, it just makes some sense.
Yeah, why play DeGrom when you can play an ace like Dane Dunning? I mean, that's the story of the day for you and me. Loco in the chat says playing all the DeGrom. Hey, Loco, go win all the money from us because I just can't. I can't do it. I'm not there. I mean, Terry, you're there. I mean, keep me apprised, Terry. If I'm building more than the 10 lineups that I'm doing today, yeah, I'm probably going to play some DeGrom, but I'm probably just going to be fading it here at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if his ownership came down to a degree where we didn't have a postponement, we didn't have any additional news now, and all of a sudden his ownership was like 10%, below 10%, it's a situation where if I'm building 150 lineups, all of a sudden I might say, all right, that's enough. I'm going to start going the other way. I'm going to start buying now, right? The stock hits a certain point and you start buying it up, right? So I want to go the other way from the field. I'm not there yet. If I see a couple rays of sunshine pop out that nobody knows about, I'll call it out and I'll call us a quick timeout and we'll talk about it again. But I'm not there yet for that one.
I just keep refreshing the top pitchers. I mean, his ownership is still at 68% here on our top pitchers tool. Oh man, it's got to just be a little bit of an eject because he is going to still be owned no matter what the result of this game is. I mean, if they call it before lock here, then people are going to be able to pivot off of it. But if it locks and then we get the postponement news on DK, I know for a fact that then that is when you're running into a lot of trouble. So I'm going to opt to go elsewhere, but I completely understand from a tournament perspective why you would want to stay on board. The amount of upside that exists in his arm, it's outrageous. He's by far the best pitcher on the slate. There's no debating that. no matter what. I'm just hoping today isn't the day.
I could fit another Dane Dunning between my projection for Dane Dunning and my projection for Jake DeGrom. Let's just put it that way. Okay. That's how big it is. So that's the difference that we're talking about with this weather. And that's how big a variable it is to me right now. So yeah, it's that concerning, but it's the most impactful thing on the slate. That's why we got to keep coming back to it.
So would you be getting debated? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to throw another pitcher into the mix that I touched on early, but we didn't really come back to. And I think he's in an interesting spot, particularly because the opposing Pittsburgh Pirates lineup has a few clunkers that have been creeping their way into the back end of the lineup that strike out more often than the guys who are in most of their numbers for the season do. So I'm curious if you're getting any Ian Anderson at price. I see some value there.
I was earlier in the day. It's kind of come down mainly because I do need the money to get to Toronto bats. I need the money because they're going so underowned in our top stacks tool, coming in at a 16.2% top stack number, being owned under 10%. There's a lot of leverage. I believe they are the most leveraged team by far on this slate. And actually the second most leveraged team we'll talk about here in a second, because we do have a great question in the chat as well about it, to address a spot that I think is going a little sneaky, but I got to be getting some of those savings. And for me, it's just going to be tough. It's probably it's more doable than playing DeGrom and then jamming in Toronto bats. But Ian Anderson, 8,600. He's more of a product of I do need that money to go down to either Pablo Lopez, to go to Eytan, who I'm taking some random shots on, and then Dane Dunning, who I'm irrationally invested in today in order to make some of those bats work. So that's just kind of where I am. The question in the chat I was alluding to, anyone on Bo Sox after Ohtani imploded last start? So Shohei Ohtani is obviously a talking point of every single slate. We can't roster him as a batter today. That really sucks. I like doing that. Most people do. Shohei Ohtani as a pitcher, definitely been phenomenal with a 32.3% K percentage. There's some boom bust that exists on this guy, but what we saw against the Yankees was he was getting a little bit squeezed. I will say that, but he definitely walks dudes. 13.6% walk rate on the entire season. Looking at this Boston lineup, everybody walks. Everybody gets on base. Everybody, they don't walk. They just don't get gypped because they don't strike out that much. There's only one guy in the lineup here in the projected lineup. That's, I believe, one of them that we are still. Nope, we've got it here at the moment. I'm looking at it, and Connor Wong. He's the one guy there, 62.5% K percentage. That's irrational. That's like 3 plate appearances. So there's that. But everybody doesn't strike out up and down this lineup for the most part. And if he gets those walks going, Boston could just keep moving the line. And there's some crazy power potential that also exists. So Ohtani giving up hard contact on the season as a pitcher, 44.4% hard hit percentage. How do you feel about a Boston stack today?
It's interesting. With the ownership not there at all. Everybody across the board, up and down, under 1% or 2 ownership on this team. They're somewhat expensive. They're going up against a pitcher that we do think is a talented guy. You mentioned the strikeout rate, 32.3%. That's crisp. A nice 3.56 xFIP. The walks are really concerning with Ohtani. He puts way too many guys on base. You mentioned Boston's ability to get on base, which is something that I touched on in my column this afternoon. These guys weren't my featured stack, but they were among the stacks that I wrote about. The 2 through 7 hitters in the confirmed lineup have an average on base percentage of 350. That's excellent. A lot of these guys are just going to be on. And then you've got the core of Martinez, Bogarts, and Devers that have a WRC plus average of 144. So it means they, on the average between the three of them, create runs 44% better than the average hitter. So that's just a spectacular core. And then you're bolting on guys like Alex Verdugo on the top, Hunter Renfroe on the back end of it with a ton of power. I really like how that stack comes together basically every slate. I think this team's always in play. You throw in the ability to get on base up against that walk rate that Ohtani's got, that untenable walk rate. There's definitely upside there. The idea that they're going to smash a bunch of home runs, drive him out of the game, do what the Yankees did to him the last time out, I don't necessarily think it's that. I don't necessarily, and I don't put any stock in the idea that, he got lit up the last time out, so that's going to happen again. It's not because of that by any means, but because of some of these things that we talk about, too many free passes with a team like this that is good at both sequential hitting and power. I think there's significant upside for the Red Sox, and I wouldn't really be looking at Ohtani that much as a pitcher, given that 45% of the field looks like they're on him on DraftKings. That would kind of push him off the board for me. On FanDuel, by the way, since you like getting him as a hitter, he's only a hitter today, $4,600 in your outfield.
Well, there we go. I mean, come on now. They literally only a hitter on FanDuel today?
FanDuel's making some strange decisions lately, and that was one of them, yeah. Yep.
What is happening in the world today? I mean, I don't even understand. Okay, I just clicked over there. I just built a lineup on FanDuel while you were talking as well, because I had to make sure I got my Dane Dunning exposure over there as well as we're going through everything here today. Because I would have really felt left out to not join the party there and not qualify for this live queue. That would be very fun. Good times had by all. Let's see. Anybody else that has questions here? Anyone on the Phillies today? I think that, that's going to be a team that people definitely are going to kind of get a little bit more specific. If I'm trying to like cut into some of the ownership that exists here, I mean, you're seeing out of everybody. I mean, Rhys Hoskins was very, very low owned yesterday. He was in the 6 hole. He's moved up a little bit here now to, I believe, to the 5 hole. So I think that that'll cut in. Maybe he'll be a little bit more owned, but God, the Phillies are going to be impossible to get away from in a cash scenario. Every single guy that's going to be under 4K, whether that's Segura, Real Muto for sure is your catcher play. Didi Gregorius, Alec Boehm is even in play there. Travis Jankowski's 2.1K. Is there a specific way you would stack up the Phillies if you went that direction today?
I mean, just looking at where the ownership's falling, I know that Andrew McCutchen and Rhys Hoskins would be a part of that stack, just based on those two guys being premium bats. They're both hitting in the 230s if you care about batting average. And Hoskins is struggling throughout the triple slash in terms of the 231, 310, 474. The back end with the 474 is fine. And the slugging percentage, he's got a 244 ISO and 19 home runs in his 345 plate appearances. So the power is still there, really. 25.5% strikeout rate. You might be baking in a 0 with Rhys Hoskins, but I like his ability to mop up the top end of that stack if you're going to those guys. If you're adding Bryce Harper with JT Realmuto into that, you're putting all your ownership weight back in there. But he's a guy who can clear the bases of those guys at low ownership. So I like the way that comes together. I would think about Didi Gregorius, terrific left-handed hitter. He's got a little pop and a little bit of upside. On the FanDuel slate, he's getting a lot of ownership though. He's over 25% because he cost $2,500. So he's a little trickier over there. But I like the look of him better on DK. Alec Boehm, he had a nice game last night. I could take or leave him. I think he's going to be good at some point, but I don't know that the bat's totally there yet. 5 home runs on the season, a .095 ISO. Not a lot on the bone there yet for Alec Boehm. So it would be about the top 6 hitters for me.
That's fair. I'm looking at the MLB. Awesemo MLB Twitter handle. That's also what you need to be following, keeping up to date with all the news. We put all the lineups out. News Guy does a phenomenal job with that account, keeping everybody updated with whether it's injury updates or late scratches or rain or no matter what it is. So be following at Awesemo MLB, and then also follow the News Guide at News Guide. That's with a Z _DFS. So definitely be checking out both of those things. Give him some love over on the Twitter sphere. While you're at it, follow at DigitalB21. Keep up to date with all of Terry's goings on in the DFS sphere, and myself at Eric Lindquist. That's a shameless self-promotion. I have no problem with such things, but let's get to, everybody loves some dong picks. Let's give some dong picks, not in the negative connotation. We are going for the positive dong picks. That's what we're looking for today. My guy is really no question. Like, I think he is the most likely guy out of everybody on this entire slate. Jose Urena is so bad. Like, he is outrageously bad. 48% hard hit percentage, 489 expected slugging, only a 14.1% K percentage, under 9% to left-handed bats here on the season. I was just laughing with Adam Scherer. It's like, how obvious is Joey Gallo to play as a one-off on the slate? I don't think it's obvious enough to some people. Just play Joey Gallo in your lineups and move on with your day. Terry, how about yourself?
I do not disagree with that call at all. I got a pretty nice little mark on him today. Had him higher yesterday, and he was my home run pick and came through for me yesterday. Today, I'm going with the top of my board. It's another guy who's kind of chalky like Gallo was yesterday. That's Vladdy Guerrero. Kind of an easy name to throw out there. He's not the chalkiest guy in that lineup, though, and is obviously best hitter in that lineup. Just an absolute stud. I wrote up the Blue Jays stack today, and when I got to Vladdy, I just started it as, when I write up the Angels, I basically say Mike Trout is Mike Trout in my player-by-player breakdowns, and then I move on to the next guy. Vladdy's approaching that territory. He has just been so spectacularly good that anytime I go to this Blue Jays lineup, he's the first guy I want to put in my lineup, and I want to figure out how everybody works around him to get him in there. So just a hell of a good hitter. That's my home run pick for the day.
I am trying to find some weather updates here at the moment, just looking around. Obviously, the News Guide is going to check it out for all of us here. I mean, being in a delay, it's not the say all and end all for this Mets game whatsoever. I'm just nervous about it here and trying to decide. I have one build that does have DeGrom in it that I'm considering firing in here on DK last second. it's so gross. It is the worst feeling in the entire world looking at this. Anybody else that kind of let's go for a low cost bomb. I think people like those here as well. I'm kind of looking around some of the savings that you have over on DK specifically. I'll let you cover the FanDuel slate. You always do a phenomenal job of being able to balance that out a little bit here for me. But I think Anthony Santander going up against Steven Matz, 2,800 over on DK. He's only got 5 homers on the season, 668. But this ballpark, I don't think it can necessarily be understated. Camden Yards is just a phenomenal spot to be going into. And, Steven Matz here in this spot, decent enough pitcher. I'm just going to be happy to be going up against him here with a righty. How about you?
I love that call. I was actually going to look to the Orioles as well. I was going to throw Austin Hayes into that mix, 2,700. Okay. The exact same idea. I have a 12.58 over the magic number of 10 on the home run model for Santander, your pick. I have Hayes at 12.86. And the two guys in between the Mancini and Mountcastle, I have above both of those guys. So those 4 hitters, if you're looking for an Orioles stack that isn't crazy high owned, is not at all expensive, helps you pay for some of these pitchers. I like the meat of the Orioles lineup here. And you can bolt on Cedric Mullins up top if you want to. Back end of it a little less appealing. But that core there is pretty nice.
Seems like every single day that's a team that you can stack up. It's 85 degrees in Camden Yards, 70% humidity, winds blowing out to right. Cedric Mullins left on left. I don't really mind it. I think that can be one of the spots where we don't necessarily always have those biases right on right, but for whatever reason, people just pull the trigger on lefties. And Cedric Mullins, I believe, 2 weeks ago? He was second in wins above replacement in MLB on an absolute crap team. That's hilarious. I saw him make some unbelievable catches at the Angels game on Sunday. He had a couple. He ended up pinch hitting and just played fantastic. But, again, in a losing cause because Baltimore is terrible as a real baseball team.
Super early in the year. And I didn't badmouth him, but I basically wrote him off as like, this guy doesn't belong in a major league lineup, blah, 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 blah. I think that was the day he went out and double donged against my Yankees back in April or something like that. And he's had a very nice season since. So I assume he's a member and a reader. Another one I wanted to little bulletin board material. Another one I wanted to throw into the mix for the low cost down because he's up near the top of my board is who I mentioned earlier today, Aristides Aquino. Only 2,200 on the FanDuel slate, 3,300 on DK. One of the top end hitters in terms of the propensity to hit a home run on my board today. So wanted to call that out for another low cost option. Really like him as part of red stacks or as a cheapo one off.
Love that as well. We've got Garrett Cooper dong. Don't mind it. George Springer dong. Yeah, definitely. Sure. I will say that is one guy that I am definitely cheering for to go yard. Batting cleanup here for the Toronto Blue Jays. I have that team stacked up 94 different ways. Actually, I only have 10 lineups, so I'm not going to lie to you. I have it stacked up like 6 ways. So there's that. Looking at the rest of the board, I'm seeing if we're getting any updated changes to Jacob deGrom's ownership. It's come down a little bit. So I just ran it again, 57.5% ownership over on DK. Doesn't look like people are coming off of him. I'm not sure what that means or what that says. God, it just makes me so uncomfortable because I want to get to some of these top end bats. And you're going to, like, if deGrom goes for 30, he's not going to completely kill me here on this slate. But against this Brewers lineup, you're looking at this and it's like, of course he's going to go for 45 now in this spot, right?
Right. And that's the thing. And I was talking about it before the show with a couple of the guys in our Slack chat is, you were looking at a deGrom start here where he has so much strikeout upside that he could have a start like he had the last time out where he gave up 3 early runs and then went on to strike out like 15 hitters and put up a monster score anyway. So you really need this to be the spot where if this game plays dry, where the Brewers really got to deGrom, right? They got to him for 6-7 runs, drove him from the game early and really limited his upside because he's got that spectacular strikeout stuff. Somebody at the beginning of the day was saying that his over-under for strikeouts today was 11.5, which I thought was kind of bananas and a little high. But I've got him projected for, I think, a little over 9 strikeouts, and I think that might be a little low. So, I mean, there is significant upside potential for him. Just to throw Dark Sky, the weather site that Alex likes to use, into the mix, and I see that Alex has him at a 25% chance of postponement for this game now. Dark Sky has that little gap of rain. They've got that as like light rain now. It's not even a totally clean patch after 8:30. And then from 8:30 to 10, it's like light rain after heavy rain. And then it goes back to heavy rain now from 10 o'clock until about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, man.
This does not make me comfortable with this game at all. And we're talking about like heavy-ish, like non-playable. I'm not talking about that. Oh, yeah, you can kind of see on the TV that it's raining there. I'm talking about heavy rain. So I don't like it.
What's your risk tolerance, everybody? And I mean, I will say Jacob deGrom is not going to be unowned. That's the main reason I'm hitting eject. So anyway, Swanson79 in the premium Slack, he said, just got here, building late, thoughts on Dodgers stacks. Just as when they go off, it's really good as a thought. I'm not sure what the end of that meant, but how do we feel about Dodger stacks for Swanson79, who has a Phoenix Suns logo? Best of luck to you tonight, sir.
Yeah, there you go. Going up against Pablo Lopez, he's a good pitcher. 91 innings over 17 starts, 25.8% strikeout rate, 3.44 xFIP, 1.08 WHIP. Only walks 6% of hitters, induces 11.2% swinging strikes. We all know basically what Pablo Lopez is. We're just growing to one of the better teams in baseball with not that much ownership on them. So, yeah, I have no issues going to this lineup at all times. We heard Steve in the chat. Was that on the last show or during our show? I forget. But he was on Gavin Lux for the home run. So if you're going to a guy like that, okay, if you're going to a guy like that from late in this lineup, I would imagine that means Steve likes probably some of the other hitters in this lineup as well. Probably some of the lefties like Cody Bellinger, like a Max Muncy here. There's some appeal in that Dodger stack when they're this low owned. I would say that against most pitchers. And Pablo Lopez, while he's a talented guy, he's not anybody to fear completely wiping this team out either.
So I'm looking here. Loco just updated in the chat once more here, 3:54 p.m. my time, so 2 minutes ago. Looking at the radar, 7:30 startup time was likely too optimistic, but 8 to 9 o'clock start time is reasonable. Thus, game is not risk-free, but I do think there is 1 out of 10 chance the field is unplayable or the rain lingers a little bit longer. Little to no in-game delay risk. Okay, so if you see that game, I don't know if we're going to get that news here in the next 14 minutes before lock of that game. But yeah, I guess let's fire up New York. I'm going to do a little bit of changing here. I think we got to probably get ourselves, Dane Dunning's an ace, so I'm not worried too much about all my lineups, but I got to get a couple shares of Jacob deGrom in here. I'm way at 0%. I'm way underexposed here. So I'm going to fire that up here at this point in time. Let's just roll with it. Please, God, work out. Anything else here?
Dane and pray for rain. That's my approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are good times. Trace Chest here says, I don't know MLB. I think I know MLB okay, but that is your opinion. You can let me know. It's all good times. I'm not too worried about it, but I think I know some MLB. I can at least
talking to you about it for the last 57 minutes or so, and I hadn't noticed anything where you were coming up lacking. I'll say that much.
Oh, well, that's fantastic to hear. I don't know. Somebody was trolling me this morning too. Feels really nice because you know what that means? You're doing something right, and I'm here and you're not. So that's exciting. Going around the rest of the league, is there anything else that we haven't touched base on in these last couple of minutes leading up to lock as people are finishing up their lineups? Something you want to reiterate, some player or stack that's really kind of showing out? I mean, Jacob deGrom, I think you got to get on to a little bit. I'm going to adjust my lineups. I'll just give the floor to you.
Yeah, I'd be scrambling to maybe push some deGrom in my lineups after that weather update from our team. I know it was in contrast to exactly the opposite of what I was saying, but I trust Alex on that stuff more than I trust my own ability to read this thing. If he's thinking the weather's rolling that way, I would probably roll with that. So I'd be looking at that. I think there are some interesting pitchers that we didn't even really touch on, like Adam Wainwright going up against the heavy strikeout San Francisco Giants, one of the better home run hitting teams in the league against both hands, but they strike out a lot against righties. So I think there's upside there for Waino at only 8,200 on the FanDuel slate, 8,100 on DK. You could get to him. I think there's upside for Luis Castillo. We didn't touch on him, 8,500 on both sites. Going up against Kansas City, he struggled through the year. I like that Kansas City offense in terms of they've got like hit tool guys, speed guys, power guys throughout the lineup. So they could do some damage to him, but he's got strikeout upside on that slate. Eovaldi is at a price point that I don't like for him up against that Angels team, but I think he's at least projectable for a decent start. Jamison Taillon, I think, got a brief mention, but 7,100, 7,200 across sites against a very weak Seattle lineup. Could squeeze a little bit of upside out of him. If we take deGrom back off the top of this board and we're just considering Nola, Rodon, Valdez the top three starters, it becomes a much flatter pitching slate, and a slate where I'd be looking to spread out to some of these names I just mentioned. Somebody just asked about Chris Bassett and the Houston stack going up against them. I think that's one where I would probably stick away from both sides. If I was taking a position on it, I'd probably roll with the Houston Bats, just given their overall upside and their overall skill. I think it would just have the ability to overcome his talent. He's been pitching really well, but he's like a mid-range guy who's pitching over his head maybe slightly on the season, 25.2% strikeout. So their ability to put the ball in play, limit strikeouts. I would come down on the Astros side, but I just think it's probably a non-DFS kind of a game, like a 4-4, a 5-4 kind of a game.
Man, are you a hero or are you a hero? Just giving me all the time to be able to plug everything in that I needed to. Rehash it a little bit. All right, I got 40% Jacob deGrom here. That was stressful, actually. Kind of pieced it together here, so I won't completely go down with that ship. Jordan, are we going all the way up to 405, or are we going to be calling it? We're going up to 405. Perfect. If anybody has any other questions to kind of fire in here as we are leading directly up to lock here. Mets game probably starting. Yeah, it's going to start a little bit later. That is a foregone conclusion if they get that thing going for sure. Somebody said Cody Bellinger dong ? I don't mind it.
I don't like that call. They weren't popping on my board to the degree that I assume they were on Steve's when he made that Gavin Lux call. But definitely, I can throw a lefty, and Cody Bellinger is not only one of the best home run hitters in the game, but he's one of the best overall hitters in the game. So I know he's struggling this season. If it seems weird to say that about a guy with a 189, 307, 316 triple slash this year, but look at his numbers of seasons past. That's who Cody Bellinger is. He'll get there. I love the upside for a home run there. No doubt about it.
Yeah, it was Mark Paquette. That was the person who gave the weather update. One of the handles here, talking about New York Mets radar here, taking a look at that. So I appreciate that, Jeremiah Anderson, keeping that updated here. Roof is closed at Globe Life Field today as well. That's a good thing to know from the news god. Just kind of keeping everything updated here. But yeah, unowned Astro stack at home against Bassett. He's pitched well, but Houston under 1% ownership. I think that on any slate like this whatsoever, whether you want to pick out the Dodgers, whether you want to pick out the Red Sox, potent offenses are super viable on these massive slates because you're going to get them at ownership that doesn't even make sense on any other slate where it's going to be a 6-8 game slate. I have no problem going to either of them. I think the Boston side is one I'm interested in because Ohtani does have a walk problem from time to time. He's also going to be one of the highest owned pitchers on the slate. So I think that there's some leverage, some major leverage to be had by going that direction. And while, you definitely look at Bassett and you can see that he's going to get some ownership, he's at 0.5% ownership. You're not getting any leverage whatsoever by going to Houston, going to his direction, as opposed to like rostering the Red Sox. What do you think about that, Terry?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think that's a better angle to take on the slate. I think there's just more upside there in terms of there are going to be more opportunities in that game created, most likely by the opposing pitcher than what Bassett's likely to give to Houston. I think another somewhat similar spot in terms of how that plays with the walks, with the free passes, is taking some of those Yankees shares. They're heavier owned than the Red Sox are, but just taking up that position against Justice Sheffield, who not only walks a decent amount of hitters, 9.6% walk rate, a 1.71 whip is just really ugly, a 4.90 xFIP. He only strikes out 17% of hitters, gives up an 11.6% barrel ball rate. So a new metric that I've been playing with that I was reading about, and I don't have a full handle on it yet, okay? So don't kill me here. But I'm calling it BBB minus K, right? It's barrel ball rate plus walk rate minus strikeout rate. And it gives you an indicator, and it's supposedly a pretty predictive indicator along the lines of like an xFIP or a Scherer in a simplified format that's just looking at some of the power upside. And once you go with that formula, I haven't done a times -1, which would probably fix the way it looks. Big negative numbers are better. So guys like, let's say a Garrett Cole, when he was pitching well, would have like a -30 something based on taking that strikeout percentage, the low walk percentage, et cetera, et cetera. Taking just the Sheffield here, he's at a positive 4.2 with those numbers. So giving up way too many barrel balls. It's basically about the free passes plus the opportunities for power. So he's at a positive 4.2. If you jump over and look at Ohtani in that split, he was still at like a -11. So you're still dealing with a much more talented pitcher. You're dealing with a guy who does strike out a lot more hitters. So maybe just based on where that upside is, you got to play that game and consider, all right, I'm throwing lower owned hitters into a much better pitcher who does, while we do have those indicators, does also still have the ability to get through those struggles a little bit better than this other guy. So I think that's awesome. An interesting lens to consider that through.
I just love that. We got 1 minute leading up to lock. We've got a question from Charles Kelly. Anderson or Dunning or Wainwright, FanDuel large GPP. I mean, I'm going the Dunning route, so I can't advise you to do something that I'm not here at this point in time. I don't mind Wainwright whatsoever. I think all the points that both you and Adam made, 8,200 over on the FanDuel slate, going to be very, very different there. Getting a little bit more owned there, 4.8% chance of being a top pitcher, 8.8% on ownership. Do you have a lean one way or the other on that one?
Yeah, with that one, if you have the cash to spend, I would trust my projections, what I'm getting here, and I would jump from Dane Dunning up to Ian Anderson, who I do have higher on the board. I just couldn't afford to get to him with the lineup that I built. I would greatly prefer Ian Anderson in that spot. He projects beautifully for me. There are a few additional strikeouts baked into that Pittsburgh lineup, which is usually very good at limiting strikeouts, second best in the league against righties. This confirmed lineup jumps from a 21 rate to a 24% rate based on some heavy strikeouts in small samples, no doubt, in the back end of the lineup. But there's just a weak John Nagowski, Wilmer Difo, Michael Perez, Jared Oliva back end final 4 hitters here that I don't think he's got much of an issue getting through. And then you've got Ben Gamel in the cleanup spot, striking out 26.1% of the time. So there's more strikeout upside than normal, and this team just doesn't hit for that much power. The threats in the lineup are Brian Reynolds and Brian Hayes. Everybody else I'm not really that concerned about. Adam Frazier, excellent hit tool, but he's not doing much in terms of power or anything else. So he's getting on base ahead of those guys. So for me, that one's Ian Anderson. And then if you want extra savings, it would be Dunning over Leno.
Love it. Terry, we are at lock. We made it the whole way here, all the way up to the 705 lock. Best of luck to everybody playing Jacob deGrom. Best of luck to the people not playing Jacob deGrom. I guess we're all
the people playing Dane Dunning. Come on, let's be honest.
We're all on one side of the coin. It's not a pretty coin for some of us, but here we are. NBA Live Before Lock with Lofty and Josh leading you up at 8 p.m. Eastern time to the tip of the NBA Finals Game 1 between the Suns and the Bucks. Terry, do you have a pick tonight?
Oh, let's go Suns. I'm on board for CP3. I want that title for CP3. Let's go Suns.
I love it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell on the way out. He's Terry. I'm Eric. Best of luck, guys.